From the year 2000 to today, the average male's testosterone levels have dropped by more than 25%. And modern life is only making the problem worse. Algorithms are now so effective at hijacking the male brain's dopamine system that millions of men are stuck in loops of porn, OnlyFans, and endless scrolling, feeling like they're making progress, but in reality, they're stuck. According to my guest today, Stanford neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, modern life is uniquely disrupting the male brain. In this interview, he details the trap that men are falling into, as well as exactly what they need to do to climb out and optimize for success. If you're a man or you love one, you're not going to want to miss this episode. So without further ado, I bring you Andrew Huberman. Modern life seems to be hijacking men's brains. So whether it's porn, OnlyFans, social media, you've got men that are depressed, demotivated, unable to form relationships. What do you think is the actual breakdown?
I think what's happening is that the technology, AKA the algorithms, have gotten so good at tapping into the circuits for motivation that they've basically pulled many males' focus and efforts into this very narrow groove of pursuit. And you would ask any of those guys, like, what are you actually pursuing? Like is the thing that you're chasing, is there a payoff? And they'd probably say, no, I realize there's not, but I can't stop.
That's wild.
And, we've talked before about dopamine, and I think nowadays most people appreciate that dopamine is about motivation and pursuit, at least as much as it's about pleasure. Or at least the things that we're motivated to do at first bring us pleasure. The drug, the gambling, the pornography, et cetera. But that very quickly over time, it keeps us in the groove of pursuit, and that groove is getting tighter and tighter. But the pleasure value starts dropping.
Now, do you think that male acquisition of goals, like the obsession with that, is disproportionately affected by the modern dopamine hijacking things like social media, or is this universal to men and women?
I think at the extremes of sort of male-female stereotypes, I think, yes. I think that if you think about video games, porn, maybe not so much social media. I mean, social media is social, right? It's about who's saying what about who. And, sure, there's this pursuit of followers and pursuit of likes that, I think all people are susceptible to in good or bad ways. But when I look at Instagram, for instance, a platform I love and teach on and learn from, and I look at X, I would say X tends to be sort of male dominated in kind of, and its essence is kind of more masculine. The things that people are saying, how they're saying it.
They're trying to convince you.
Yeah, they're trying to convince you, and it tends to be less about who's talking about who. They might show something bad that somebody said, but Instagram is far more relational. The way that comments are structured, comments on comments, there's discussions down there that you can see. Then the way videos are pulled and reposted. It's X feels more linear, and it feels more kind of direct to one statement. It's like, okay, here's somebody being bad. Here's someone beating somebody up. Here's someone being an idiot. Here's them being, morons about the economy or morons about the election, or, whereas Instagram, if you look at the stuff that gets really high salience, it tends to be more relational. And I think that I could be wrong about this. I don't know the behind the scenes numbers, but that's the way they feel to me. I think that the Y chromosome, which basically is deterministic for maleness. There's a gene. I would have thought the Y chromosome, but it turns out there's a gene on the Y chromosome called SRY. And all the genes, eventually goes DNA, RNA, and then proteins. So proteins are the kind of the action end of the business. But all of the proteins that are downstream of the SRY gene, SRY is a transcription factor, turns on and off a bunch of different genes. So it's kind of, it sets up a menu. That SRY gene and the things on it suppress the Mullerian ducts, the fallopian tubes, the ovaries, and creates the male genitalia. And it also organizes the brain to be male. And I'll explain how it does that in a moment if you want. But what's so interesting is if that SRY gene is translocated to the X chromosome, and this has happened in humans, you get two X chromosomes, you have an SRY gene, and you get a true biological male.
Penis, whole thing.
And fertile, right? and fertile, because there are cases, for instance, where you have XY, for instance, an SRY gene, you get testosterone, you get all the different testosterone, things like dihydrotestosterone, et cetera. But there's a deficient androgen receptor, so that testosterone has no action end. It can't really work, it can't engage in the receptor, the parking slot, and have an effect. What you end up with is a biological male who looks female, testes that don't descend, and then they're infertile, basically. So you've got a chromosomally male, but it looks female. It's fairly rare, okay? But what we can say is that the SRY gene is deterministic for creating a male. And so then you say, well, what genes are downstream of SRY? And the one that's really interesting is dihydrotestosterone, DHT. Not to get too deep into the biochemistry, but testosterone, which we're all familiar with, made by the testes, gets converted into dihydrotestosterone by an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. During embryonic development, when you and I were in the embryo, downstream of SRY, we made DHT. We made testosterone, some of it was converted to DHT. That set up the brain, your brain and my brain, to be male later when it was exposed to testosterone. So when you come into the world, provided you had the SRY gene and it's functional, your brain is organized male and your genitalia are organized male. And then when you get a testosterone surge during puberty, the penis grows, the brain and the brain areas that are larger or smaller in males become that way. And then those circuits basically make you male. This is what we call deterministic because, for instance, there's a genetic mutation where, believe it or not, males, XY males with the SRY gene are born. They don't actually convert testosterone into DHT, and they appear as biological females across development. It doesn't look like they have a penis. It looks like they have a vagina. And it turns out actually they have testes that haven't descended yet. And then during puberty, testosterone is secreted from the testes, and they literally sprout a penis. It's called penis. It's called huevidosis. It's penis at 12. It's a genetic related mutation, and it's well known about in these communities where it exists because there's enough of these have occurred. That what we can say from these kind of wild, these are kind of unusual circumstances, is that if there's an SRY gene, you get a male brain, and you get a male body. If there isn't an SRY gene, even if you have XY chromosomes, you get a female body. So, the biologists have really boiled it down to that. Now,
really fast.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap this up, and then I definitely want to get back to the way that I think modern life is breaking male brains. I think uniquely, so it'll be interesting to see your take on that since you'll have the data to back it up. But I am stuck on a kid is 12. He has a clitoris. Yeah, and then it literally becomes, is it a micro penis at the end of this?
Pretty much.
Okay, so this is bad news bears. Like if you've got that, you're really bumming out.
And they often don't know, they sort of don't know that they're male or female. It's sort of like,
so they end up being surprised. Is this what people mean when they say intersex, or is that a totally different phenomenon?
That's different.
Okay.
Yeah, that's different.
All right, not to derail on that.
That's not to derail, but then let's think about when we talk about the brain being organized male, what is that, right? So everyone's familiar with testosterone. Best way to describe testosterone is a molecule that, in addition to being important for sperm function and libido and things like that, testosterone makes effort feel good. Testosterone and dopamine,
That's interesting. I've never heard that before.
Yeah, and in fact, there have been studies where testosterone has been administered to adult males. And what you find is that whatever psychological traits and behavioral traits they tend to already have just get amplified. In fact, there's a really nice study that my colleague Robert Sapolsky, the great Robert Sapolsky, taught me about, which was if you, for instance, go to an auction and you give some males testosterone, they'll try and outbid other men, which sounds like, they want to own all the stuff. Now, if I tell you that, because this is actually the case, that the auction was actually an altruistic auction, that all the benefits went to charity, these guys with more testosterone are basically fighting and giving up resources to give more resources away. So it's not that testosterone makes people jerks. However, if somebody's a jerk and they have and they're given testosterone, they'll become more of a jerk. It tends to just amplify whatever behavioral traits somebody has.
If I remember what Sapolsky was saying, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it was whatever, like testosterone is going to make the man want to win at the thing that gives him status. So if you get status by winning the give away your money auction, then cool, you're going to do that. It almost doesn't matter what the thing is.
That's right.
It's not like it's necessarily making them more altruistic. It's just making them want to win at the status game.
That's right. Yeah. So you put a finer point on it, and you're correct. So I think
that's interesting. And this is part of what I'm getting at when I say that I think modern life is uniquely breaking the male brain, is it's giving these proxies for status seeking, and it's giving you a different set of games to play that are not translating well into real life.
Yeah.
And so maybe you're winning at social media, but you're not actually translating that into a job. Or maybe you're winning at, and one of the things I most want to talk about is OnlyFans. Like you're getting the signal that you've accomplished something, acquired something, you've got relational access to a woman, and it's somehow like giving you the signal that you did the thing you came to do. But it's such a bizarre proxy. Like OnlyFans, I did not understand it. When I first heard that it was real, I was like, there's no way that people pay money for that. I'm like, they do know that porn is free, right? I could not fathom it. So am I off base here? Like as you think about OnlyFans as a specific phenomenon, what do you think is happening there?
Yeah, well, I think when I think about testosterone, the one other point that I want to make is that it tends to suppress activity of the amygdala, which is why it can make effort feel good. It tends to suppress fear. It tends to make effort feel good, as opposed to effort feel scary.
And you do that by dulling or dimming down the fear response.
That's right. Okay. It brings things that are challenging bring about less anxiety. So you're able to apply more effort with less anxiety, generally speaking. Okay. The dopamine system and the testosterone system are intimately related, especially in the male brain. Okay, so dopamine, the molecule of motivation and so forth, as we know, is associated with the pleasure of pursuit as opposed to the pursuit of pleasure. Another beautiful Robert Sapolskyism. So I didn't say that, he did, but I'm borrowing it. Let's think about a kid sitting down to play like video game. You love video games. Video games can be very healthy, right? You get a score, you're motivated. It's sort of updating with what? With novelty. Right? As you progress, you get to access more in different worlds and more in different experiences. This is also true in the non-virtual world, right? In the so-called real world. This is also true in OnlyFans to the extent, I've never gone on OnlyFans, full at foot and mittens, but I think I know what it's generally about. You pay money, you can see things that are stimulating, right? Arousing, right? That's the idea. As one does that, there's the tendency for people to seek more and more intense experiences. Why? Because the same amount of dopamine isn't being deployed as you go into it for the first time as you go into it the 10th time and the 100th time and so forth. So people are willing to invest more effort or money in order to go further and further into this terrain. I think that the most important...
What do you consider the terrain there?
Right. So are you familiar with Michael Easter, The Comfort Crisis? He wrote the book, The Comfort Crisis.
I've had him on the show.
So he shared with me that there's this very interesting study or set of studies being done at a experimental casino in Las Vegas. He lives out in Las Vegas. A few years back, somebody who worked for the casinos saw his kid playing video games and the light bulb went off for him. I'll fast forward, 85% of the revenue from casinos comes from slot machines. That didn't used to be the case. I know. I didn't believe it. I was like, there's no way. Here's what the massive shift from slot machines being a small percentage to the vast majority of the income for casinos was. He saw his kid playing video games, and he saw that in video games, there's a near infinite number of experiences that a kid can encounter with playing the game. Now, there's some constraints, right? Sure. You're the player, this and that, but in theory, you could introduce any number of different worlds or experiences and dynamics. So what he did is he brought that to the casino world, and instead of having slot machines where it just would roll numbers or fruit or crowns or whatever, they created electronic versions of this where, yes, you could update more quickly. Instead of pulling a lever, you could press a button, but more importantly, it could create an infinite number of electronic combinations so that as the person was starting to kind of grow tired, and the algorithm could tell would grow tired of trying to line up muffins with ice cream cones, they would start switching out cake for ice cream cones and like little anime girls for the other, for whatever else the other thing was. And over time, what they found is people would just keep playing and playing for even the smallest and actually increasingly smaller changes in novelty. So the newness of OnlyFans at the beginning is not what you need to recreate in order to keep the brain paying the same amount or even more to keep going. What you need is novelty, and the brain, because of the way dopamine is deployed in smaller and smaller amounts and is giving smaller and smaller amounts of pleasure, especially if you ping it with an occasional big burst of pleasure every once in a while or more dopamine, all you need to do to keep somebody paying in a landscape is give them new experiences intermittently. Good old-fashioned intermittent reinforcement. But now the reinforcement isn't necessarily a bigger monetary win or, seeing, here I'm hypothesizing, you can only introduce so many different players in a pornographic scene, right? So many different things. So they started changing the novelty in subtle ways, and it keeps people going and going and going. And I'm not going to say that the male brain is uniquely susceptible to this, but because of the relationship between testosterone and dopamine and the tendency for the male brain in its most stereotypical form, but let's just stick with that, being really in pursuit of things that are sort of forward linear motion, like looking for the next thing. I was just talking about this in the discussion I had with your wife, which was, men like to concentrate on what's happening now and forward movement. Generally speaking, we're not really like defaulting to let's talk about the past for a while. Let's think about the past. Let's rehash the past. That's not a typical male phenotype. It exists, but it has its importance, but that's not what we default to. And that has a lot to do with the fact that I do think a lot of the circuits for testosterone are about how can I have action out there, right? Stereotypically, the female brain is more oriented towards relational things. Yep. And with men, it's like, how can I have an impact out there? Like impact theory, literally. Or let's think about Elon wanting to send things to Mars. Yeah. Or let's think about the first time, cavemen probably picked up a rock. Probably after they hit themselves in the head with it, they probably hit the person next to them and they were, that hurts. And let's throw it against that wall and see if it breaks. And then let's see if we can hunt something and get a better meal. It's about action at a distance. And I'll tell you, I love watching the rockets launch. And it's one of the ultimate expressions of seeing like human engineering at a distance. Like you're having this huge impact. Whereas most of the things in life, you can't really control. They're out there and you can observe them, watch the sunset, beautiful, watch the sunrise. I'm all about that. But ultimately, our careers, our lives, our feelings of what we've accomplished are about creating action at a distance. And it doesn't mean that the further the distance, the more impactful it is, but human evolution has largely ridden this wave of this desire to let's see what happens if. And that's not like, let's see what happens if we etch a small, note in the sand. It's like, no, let's see what happens if we draw a mural as big as that wall. And then, I don't know, let's see if we can throw someone over that wall. This is the SRY gene in action, right? I'm only half kidding. I want to leave
you alone for an hour to come up with all the things that guys the crazy
think about
shit
it.
We could do.
Okay, there's relational stuff, but I have a sister. They would play in her room. I'm like, okay, you play this and you do this. And it was very relational. They weren't let's see if we can, I don't know, go build a giant, ramp in the backyard and jump over the neighbor's fence like a bunch of idiots and get impaled on it, So you can sort of make it out to where the outcome is, kind of sounds like male stupidity. But if we really step back, this is beautiful. This is essential to human evolution. This is why we have the fields that we do, which now, of course, include men and women, right? This isn't uniquely male. But this notion of testosterone and dopamine about novelty and how are we creating novelty, action at a distance. Now let's think about OnlyFans or a kid that's addicted to social media, watching YouTube all day long. I have examples of this from friends' kids that are addicted to it. There's no action at a distance. These algorithms have, as wonderful as they are, right? We exist on them as well, but they're designed, in your case, in my case, to teach people things to take into the world. But they are their own, what we call closed loop. They can create these loops where you think you're making progress, and then you look up and it's another day went by. You did nothing. You were on the consumer end of this whole business. And it really is a hijack of the dopamine. And I do think the dopamine and testosterone system is when we were talking about males.
It is very possible that I'm just not thinking about the right things. So obviously I'm hyper aware of the way that social media gives women anxiety, and that's obviously going to be deeply problematic. But when I think about the modern world, I think that we really have swung from the moment you freed women from sex equals conception, like their game has been more and more possibilities opening up to them. So I think the modern world for females has really been an expansion of opportunities, not necessarily positively in terms of like actual emotional satisfaction outcome, not necessarily negatively. I'm just saying it is
I think it depends on the person.
More.
There are more opportunities.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, academia and research science, used to be heavily skewed male. Now, depending on the subfield, right, because biology is a big field, it's still not quite 50-50, but there are many more women in the field than there were even when I started. But I agree that in general, like there's been a trend toward more openings, toward it. Yeah,
for sure. Now, for guys, on the other hand, I think that things are getting more and more narrow in terms of their ability to navigate the world well. And when I look at what are the things that are trapping them, we'll get back to the show in a moment. But first, let me tell you my go-to when I need something nourishing and quick. When I'm hungry but don't have time for a full meal, I reach for Paleo Valley's chocolate bone broth protein. I cannot tell you how much of this I actually eat. I throw it in a blender with some ice, and 30 seconds later, I have got a frozen treat that's actually good for me. One scoop gives you 13 grams of premium protein from grass-fed beef bones, not cheap hides like most products use. The chocolate flavor is rich and incredible. It's delicious, smooth, and satisfying without any artificial junk. The collagen supports supple skin and natural wrinkle defense while you're satisfying that sweet craving. You can blend in hot for a warming drink or cold like I do for that frozen treat experience. Plus, you've got all kinds of options. Vanilla, salted caramel, unflavored, or stick with my favorite, chocolate. Right now, Paleo Valley is running an insane deal. Buy one, get one free on bone broth protein. Make sure to click my link below and get the buy one, get one free deal on bone broth protein. And now, let's get back to the show. Not to get too economical, but part of it is just America since the 90s has been outsourcing things, manufacturing very specifically overseas as rapidly as possible. It's caused the loss of millions of jobs for just a certain type of guy that is evolutionarily wired to use his body as his form of intelligence. Mm-hmm. And so you start getting that, you're going to have problems. And so anyway, not to derail us on that, but when I look at what's going on with pornography for sure, and I think maybe even more extremely with OnlyFans, as I started looking at, okay, what is OnlyFans? What is this hijacking? Why is this working so well? So if you put men into the context of women are hypergamous, so they're going to date over or up. And as they enter the workforce, that means that pool is getting smaller and smaller because they're making more and more money. And then men also in another context it's a very high risk situation of being accused of something. And so there's a standoffishness. There's also the whole idea of toxic masculinity. So for decades and decades, we're like making men more and more paranoid about sort of natural impulses, which is making them less likely to pursue females. Then you create something like OnlyFans. And I'm so curious to know if the people that created it thought through it like this. But when you really think about it, to your point about action at a distance, so you can influence this person, whether it's just getting them to engage with you. So I pay them money, they engage with me. They either aren't aware or don't think about the fact it's probably not that person engaging with them, it's their team writing them back, but they feel like, okay, now I'm able to have this relationship with this person. I'm able to gain at least visual sexual access to them, things that I would not historically have been able to see. I forget the exact quote, but it's something like 1,000 years ago compared to today, a man today can see more naked females in a single day than that person 1,000 years ago would have seen in their entire lifetime. And when you think about that nested inside of the social context of things have changed for men, and then the technological context of the dopamine loops and how easy it is to put on the phone female nudity and then to make the person feel like they have a relationship with them. Once I understood OnlyFans as relational pornography, where now it's not, sure, like pornography is free, but I can't interact with that person or have a proxy of it. And so then I was like, oh my God, this is like pornography, like cubed, quintupled. Like this is really for somebody who would otherwise be isolated by choice or otherwise. You now give them this thing that they don't have to be afraid of. There's no fear of rejection. They get access to something that is legitimately exciting to the male brain, which is I'll call it inappropriate, but I get inappropriate or elevated levels of access to their body visually. And it's like, ooh, I get how now people end up, if that's the context that they're in, I get how that drags them down fast.
Yeah, I do too. I hadn't realized there was this relational aspect where the people who pay can influence what they see. I mean, that's, so they've captured the relational aspect, which is missing from traditional pornography. That's huge. The novelty aspect is somewhat under their control in this case.
Yeah, women make the most money the first month on OnlyFans. I don't know what the exact stat is, but the vast majority, first month they come in, that's going to be it, because all the guys that are paying have never seen that person before. It's the newness, the novelty of it. And then that starts to decline fast. And
it shifts standards. So one thing that's interesting is if you talk to the evolutionary biologists, they'll tell you, what is this notion of women talking badly about other women who sleep with a lot of people? What's that about? I mean, men will do that too. That's a different phenomenon. But what's that about? And the evolutionary biology argument is, well, they need to do that because if there are women who are giving up sexual access without the need for very much in return, then the cost is basically going down. It's sort of a market system argument.
Women act as a cartel.
Right.
They price collude, basically.
Right. So if that's happening, then also men's expectations of what women will or won't do starts to shift. And so this is why there's intense relational sort of community control over how female promiscuity is viewed by other women and by other men, right? Men, oftentimes on X, if even if you're not looking for it, will shame women for being promiscuous, right? There's this woman who's like slept with all these men and continues to sleep with more and more men, right?
It's wild.
Why is she such a phenomenon? Was she such a phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it? I'm not applauding what she's doing. That's her right, and I'm not the guy to talk about the ethics of
evolution is going to slap her about the head, neck, and chest. Right. I hate that it's true. She's not going to get out unscathed emotionally, not even just from other people. Just evolution does not want that.
Yeah, I mean, she's expanding the upper threshold, right? I mean, that's kind of her thing. Her shtick is to expand the upper threshold, and as a consequence, it's clear men are paying for that. They're intrigued by that, right? That they want to see that, and yet I don't think that. I'm speculating here, but I don't think that our men are running out in huge numbers to try and put a ring on her finger and make her their own.
Someone will, but yeah.
Some probably who have their own kind of distorted sense of themselves in the world. So the idea here is that, even just the realization that there's an extreme like that creates this upper ceiling on the kind of like dopamine novelty thing. Like that's not something I like ever conceived of, right? Like I never thought about that. And then you just see it out there. So it shifts, our standards of decency. It shifts our standards of sort of expectation. And we might say, well, she's a real extreme in the same way that you see those people with like tons of piercings and like covered in tattoos, every inch of their body. And then, I remember growing up, like we didn't see many people with face tattoos. Mike Tyson, I think, was the first. And you're like, whoa. Yeah. Now people wouldn't even bat an eye. And so these sort of standards, what we call, kind of cultural standards, risky to call them standards of decency because that's getting, for a scientist, I'm not trying to get into the moral judgment game. But what it does is it expands what is possible in people's minds, and therefore what they consider novel is over a bigger scale, right? So if the upper limit is, let's just call it like arbitrary units 10, was something like the pornography that like you might have seen in the 90s on a videotape or something, and now what Bonnie Blue or someone else is doing is that represents the 10. Well, then everything up to a 1 has now been compressed. Okay, not to get to like overly technical here, but it's very interesting because you're the guy that thinks about markets and finances a lot. It's a market system, right? And when we think about dopamine, I think about dopamine as the currency of motivation. I think about, is a young male or anyone investing your dopamine? What's dopamine? It's your motivation and energy. Are you investing it or are you just spending it? Now you can get things that are sheerly for pleasure, right? I eat food. You could say, well, the food gives you energy to do other things. Okay, you get a nice painting that gives you more energy and pleasure because you enjoy it. It's some visual feedback on kind of that you've gotten to the point where you could buy that. That's an investment of your dopamine resources into money into something, a painting. There's also just sheer spending of dopamine, your time and your life energy. You're not going to reproduce as a consequence of being on OnlyFans. It's probably lowering your reproductive potential, either directly or figuratively.
Yeah,
and so, and same thing with social media. You can glean incredible, valuable content. I do, you do. We teach on social media. We learn on social media that then you can take into the real world. But years ago, I think it's an investor by the name of Chris Sacca.
Yeah.
He talked about you're either a consumer or creator. You're either a consumer or creator. And I sort of, in my own mind, expanded on that and decided, well, when I go to a platform where I'm a consumer, like social media, I'm trying to glean things that allow me to be a better creator off platform and then bring those back to platform. Now think about all these people who are just consuming on social media, but it's not enriching their lives in any way. Or they're consuming on OnlyFans and it's a double whammy. Because it's taking, time is the ultimate resource, and it's depleting their motivational drive. And we used to hear about this more, that the sexual drive is one aspect of motivation, but if somebody is completely sated with food, with what they think is sex because of an OnlyFans interaction, their motivation to go do things in the world and to create real relationship, real business, real life is just, it's going to rapidly diminish. And as always, the house takes it all.
Yeah.
So
I'm legitimately worried about that. I don't know okay, so if I'm let's say I'm an 8 on I think we have a real problem right now, not just what we've been talking about. I've got a whole host of things that I think are problematic. But when I think about where we were in the 80s and the prospects that a young person growing up in the 80s were going to have in the future, look great. Now I look at that and I think, ooh, we're at an 80%, this is a problem status. Where would you put us in terms of the severity of the modern world? Well,
I think it's easier than ever to get caught in the current that we're talking about and just get carried along.
Yep.
I think it was David Goggins, that said, nowadays it's easier than ever to be exceptional. I think.
But that's because so many people are getting caught up. That's the problem. Right. I agree with him.
So for those that can get out, that can literally, and I think here, if somebody feels like they have to get on YouTube, they have to, I don't want to ding YouTube. Okay. I feel like, if somebody feels like it's controlling them, like it's got them instead of they've got it, or OnlyFans, certainly with OnlyFans, the only answer is abstinence. Now, and I'm not saying this from a moral perspective. The only answer is you're never looking at it again, which is going to send some people into oblivion. They're like, wait, why can't it just be a little bit? The same way that now it's called having alcohol use disorder. What used to be called somebody with alcoholism or an alcoholic. You'd say, how many drinks can they have? 0.
Right.
How many drinks? How do you do that? You have to replace that behavior with something useful, like 12-step, like a rehab program, like some sort of group where you can really take that energy and put it elsewhere and be rewarded for those other new behaviors. This is the hard part about OnlyFans versus real world relationship is stopping is just one part of it. But we know, based on all the science of behavioral change and the dopamine system, et cetera, you need to give that person a replacement behavior. And the reason 12-step is so effective at treating alcoholism, it's so that people get sober and stay sober from drugs, from alcohol, from other gambling addiction. It's hard, but they have a community in which the reward system is now rooted around the sobriety they're trying to achieve. And I may have told this story before, but I have a good friend. His kid was absolutely addicted to just watching YouTube videos all day. His friends had gone off to college, smart kid. He wasn't really holding a job well. He had a bunch of other issues. I'm not saying ADHD doesn't exist. I do think it exists, but he had been diagnosed with ADHD. He's on all the classic meds. And the picture was kind of bleak in year 1 after high school, year 2, year 3, year 4. Fast forward to now, he's now a junior in college on a hard major. How did he do that? It started with him understanding dopamine, him understanding that it had him and going full cold turkey.
Did you talk to him?
I did. Yeah, I did. And it was actually the conversation with Anna Lemke from Stanford, who really deserves the credit, author of Dopamine Nation.
All right, what's the magic sequence of words? What was it?
It was, look, it makes every bit of sense why you feel like you have to do this, but it's controlling you. And the only way to regain control, like to get the control panel back, is to take a week off. And he was just like, there's no way. It was like a week off. And so he self-imposed a day. It was a kind of classic one day at a time kind of thing where he could call me. He could call, this is how it happened in several instances with cannabis, another discussion. I'm not anti-cannabis for everybody, but I know some people that have really succumbed to like using cannabis, dropping out of college, losing their relationship, being online all day. Boom, losing their job also. This is a real world scenario. I'm not making this up. And then by going full abstinence and then focusing on a 12-step program in the case of the cannabis situation, or in the other case, just doing a one day at a time. You're calling.
Yeah, stick with homeboy that he's watching too much
He's
YouTube.
texting me at the end of the day. I managed to get to the end of the day.
And what was he doing during the day? He's not just staring at a wall.
No, I told him to get outside and take a bike ride, take a walk, do anything but, at first it's just anything but behavior. You're just
when did that become drive? Because I've always, I can't remember when, but I had a parent ask me like, hey, my kid is really in trouble and I don't know what to do. We've tried everything. And I was like, okay, if I had one shot and I've got to guarantee results, I was like, oh, this is easy. You're never going to do it, but I'll give you the answer and it will work not 80% of the time or 90%. This will work 100% of the time. Get 5 people that he respects, kidnap him, take him out onto a deserted island. And those guys are going to do things that he has to join them in doing to earn their respect. And if he respects them before they kidnap him and take him out, he will conform to the group. And it's like all of this stuff to me, and I get it. This is one of the things that drives people crazy about me. But this really seems, if you understand how the brain works, if you accept men and women are different, if you accept we are not blank slates, if you go, men are goal oriented, men want to be a part of the pack, men want to do the things that are going to earn their respect, the respect of the group. Doing hard things is, I wouldn't have had the words to say that testosterone makes effort feel good, but it's like effort feels good.
And there's feedback. Sorry to interrupt. Correct. And there's feedback when you accomplish something. Wake up in the morning, control something you can control. If it's getting sunlight, but then get your sunlight, but then hydrate, get exercise, but do something that's under your control and where you can have an outcome that is a positive investment of your energy, of your dopamine. That has a positive feedback on the testosterone and dopamine system. And lo and behold, you have more energy as opposed to spending it out. No, I absolutely agree with your kidnap and take to a desert island, because it captures all the elements of how the male brain works and wants to participate and wants to achieve things. I absolutely agree. I think that, we are a social species, and even though men, maybe we're not relational in the case, like you leave, 5 average males in a room, they're not going to play, they're not going to play house, and they're going to play like
kick you in the face.
Yeah, they're going to beat each other up, or they're like wrestling. Someone's going to be jumping off the top and like suplexing people. Like that's males, right? Yeah. And sure there are exceptions to that. There are less physical males, et cetera. But at some point, there has to be that effort, dopamine, reward, action loop. And the thing is that effort, dopamine, reward, action loop is in the OnlyFans interaction. It's in all sorts of interactions. The problem is when you're deep in that, in that trench, it's impossible to see that you're not going anywhere. You're treadmilling. You're not going anywhere. In most cases, you're spiraling down. And it's just very hard to see because that dopamine and the state of arousal that it creates puts you into a warped world where your time binning starts getting very fine. You're just focused on the next increment, the next increment, the next increment. And it's like, we talk about getting out and getting perspective. Very hard to do. Very hard to do. And I do think you're right. I think we need to yank ourselves out or have someone yank us out of that scenario. In this case, we set something up where he had to call me every single day or text me every single day. Although I realized calling was more important because texting, people are much more willing to kind of like, oh yeah, I did it, but they actually didn't. Now, it took some time. I'm not going to say there weren't some relapses, but over time, he got to see the difference between how he felt when he relapsed versus how he'd felt right before. Sure, he went through the same shame cycle, like, oh, I'm weak, and then back on the horse and kept going. It's an incredible thing now, I have to say. He's not my kid, but it's incredible. I've known him since he was a little one. To see him like in his junior year of college, he's in a relationship, like he takes care of himself, he's going to be, if he stays on track, a fully functional male in society. But it was looking super bleak. And the parents have all the makings of like a reasonably educated, reasonably happy home, no major trauma, none of that. It was his SRY gene susceptibility to things that were happening at that time. And he almost became one of the failure to launches.
Yeah, this is one of those things. Just trying to get people to understand that we are not blank slates is like part of my mission. So for people that join me on the lives, they'll have heard this like a gazillion times, but I really feel like I'm in a battle for the soul of America right now, and really getting people to understand that one, just you're having a biological experience. So you have got to come to understand your biology, stop judging it, stop trying to like cram everybody into an overly modern box. The fascinating thing is I'm probably the most optimistic about what's on the other side of this weird space that we're in, where we metabolize the technological revolution, much like the Industrial Revolution literally changed the world in ways we never could have predicted. And going through that, I'm sure, was extremely tumultuous. And it was just, whenever you're going through that kind of upheaval of structure, there are going to be people that fall down, that you get crushed by the rubble, obviously metaphorically, but then you get to the other side. But you don't get to the other side by accident. You either just burn through the transitionary people and they have a hard time of it, life sucks, whatever, but they die. You have some big war, and then you're on the other side of it, and then we're just forced to adapt. Or if you can orient yourself to what's actually going on, then you can avoid the problems. But you have to understand your biology. You have to know what the potential dangers are. And so when I look at OnlyFans, going from just complete confusion to, okay, I get what this is now. And now I see it as something that's even more dangerous than I thought it was before, in terms of its ability to suck you in, when you have to take it in the grander context of, we've been telling boys that males are toxic. Men don't necessarily understand hypergamy and like sexual market value. And you have to understand that. And then making it such that men are being, like, you're always in danger of being put on blast on social media for a bad text or DM or whatever. And so now you've got like the fear centers going crazy, and up right there comes this real easy serve up. And so the things that we have to talk about, the things we have to draw circles around and say, okay, this is why this is a problem. You've got to watch out for that. You're going to need a substitute for that. So like, what is that thing that you're going to be doing? But to create the new thing for them to be doing, you cannot demonize the things that they're naturally drawn towards. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we run into trouble.
Yeah, I think amen to that. I mean, I think that explaining to men that what's been hijacked reflects the best part about their biology, their deepest like circuits of effectiveness, but they've been hijacked and they're being misused to someone else's gain. I think that's an important part of the messaging to get people out of that loop. Or I think it's the first step. Not just like, oh, it got me, but the idea that, because I do think that another aspect of maleness is this idea like nobody wants to be controlled, right? That you're the agent of control. And, it's James Hollis, the great psychoanalyst, who, he has this incredible lecture online called Creating a Life. I invited him on my podcast. He's 84 years old. And I'm like, what's the key? He's so aware of what a really good life looks like for men and for women. And he's written a lot on men's trauma. He wrote a book called Under Saturn's Shadow, which is a really powerful book specifically about men's trauma. This is years ago, before everything was therapized.
Why Saturn? What's Saturn?
Oh, I forget the notion of this has to do with some mythical text. He's much more scholarly about those things than me. So forgive me for not knowing. But he said, look, the solution to this is actually quite simple, but quite hard.
Like, this being modern life is like messing us up?
Like directing your life, being the agent of control in your life, especially if you're male, but also if you're female. But since we're talking about men, which is you have to, yes, develop a sense of, I think he calls it, suit up, show up, and work. Like you just have to have that, like, okay, it's time to work. It's just like time, like you did with your business, and you continue to do. Or Jocko, there's like 4:30. You just got to show up, suit up, show up, and get to work. You have to develop that. You also have to have a place where you reflect and decide where you're going to direct your energies, and that has to come first. And then you just keep looping the two. And he talks about it not as a form of meditation, but literally a stopping for even just a few minutes a day. And it sounds so simple, but it's hard to do, where you literally just close your eyes and you think, like, is my energy being directed in the areas and directions that make sense for me? Am I building my life? and you set some intentionality. Because we hear all the thing, between stimulus and response is, this buffer, very hard when you're in the moment. And, these algorithms are so damn good at looping us in that we can because really they do one of two things. They either allow us to numb out and pass time, or they give us just enough arousal, kind of rage bait and engagement, or intrigue, like sexual intrigue, or like maybe you're looking at, like maybe you like cute puppies. It's not sexual at all. Or maybe it's rage bait, or maybe it's a fight where someone gets punched in the face. Open up X, you can see all of these things. It will find the hook. So the idea is that you set your, for lack of a better word, your intention about, and you understand that you have this energy that you were born with that's replenishable. It's, again, all harkens back to dopamine. You can deplete it, but it's replenishable. And you start thinking, how am I investing that? And then the key thing is to, at some point, relatively early in the day, you have to invest in something that has a logical and real payoff for the expansion and growth of your life. And even if you write a paragraph, even if you, as long as you are investing in your future in some way, it's the difference between $1 spent and $1 invested, or $1 wasted and $1 invested. And I think that Hollis really nails it with that. It starts with this like recognition, and then subtle things that control your behavior. And sometimes people have to divide their day into thirds, he tells me, in order to be able, these aren't even just addicts, but he'd be able to the first third of my day is going to be completely under my control. I think that, said differently, if you explain to men that they can control themselves as opposed to other things controlling them, they're going to start to look at it as a fight. And if you start winning that fight, I deal with this every day. I'm like, I'm going to just get on my phone. And I'm like, I'll just look for a second. I'm like, man, okay, I'm going to look. And then I saw something the other day and I was like, I don't want to see that. So I scrolled to the next thing. It was the opposite. And I was like, damn it. And I took the thing, I put it down on his face. I'm like, man, it almost got me. And I'll tell you, the feeling of satisfaction when you're like, nope. And then you actually go do something useful. And you can bet I picked that thing up 3 more times before I actually dropped into a good groove on something. The feeling that one gets is so empowering. And it's not just quote unquote empowering. It's literally a surge in your own sense of agency. And you've increased your dopamine stores. Your arousal state continues to go up, as opposed to just, 2 hours went by and you're just thinking, I should do this, I should do that.
I think that only works though if you aim at something that is in line, I'll say, with your biology. I always think of things through the lens of evolution. That's what I was saying about Bonnie Blue. She's not in line with what evolution wants you to do. And so you're gonna have a profound sense of dis-ease. Can't remember if it was her, but I think it was, that after her first 100 guys in 24 hours or whatever, she was crying. She was surprised that she's crying about whoa, I didn't expect to feel like this. That is not what evolution wants you to do. You have so much wiring.
Yeah, it runs countercurrent to everything we know about wiring of the female brain, everything. Which is not to say that I'm judging promiscuity, but hers represents an extreme of performative promiscuity that, I agree. I mean, we could think of 100 other parallel examples of self-abuse that.
I don't even think of it as self-abuse. It's just, if you're out of alignment with what the deeply embedded in your brain algorithms want you to do, it only has 2 levers, pleasure and pain, from an evolutionary perspective. So it's going to make it feel bad. It's just trying to make it feel bad so you stop doing it. Now, I don't need anybody to think she's a bad person. I don't think she's a bad person. I feel bad anytime I have to go through something where I'm like, whoops, I'm clearly out of alignment with what nature wants from me. Or if somebody else does something that's out of alignment with what nature wants from them, it's it's going to suck. You've got to find that thing. And I bring that up in this context. So guys are only going to be able to get out of this rut if they figure out to aim at something with, I'll call it high utility, a thing that is in alignment with what men are hardwired to do, that culture is going to celebrate, so that as they do it, they get some sort of positive feedback from the world around them. So what would you, obviously it's not going to be neuroscience, but what would you have men aim at as a category of thing, so that then they can structure their lives in such a way that putting the phone down makes sense because I'm actually aiming at this thing?
I thought you were going to tell me that you're developing an online platform that is incredibly addictive, that allows men to build their financial portfolio or creative portfolio.
That's interesting. We'll get into game development if we have time, where I'll explain why I still, because I'm utterly fascinated by that stuff. But no, I just want to know, what should guys aim at?
Well, I will, I'm borrowing a lot today, but I will borrow from Ryan Holiday and say that if you don't know what you want to do with your life, you should probably go to college.
Okay.
Because, his idea is,
if you're 35.
You should probably get involved in some education or vocation that
broad
you can apply.
spectrum.
Broad
Is
spectrum.
that the idea?
Yeah, I mean, if you can
encountering
afford to
ideas.
do that, I mean, certainly work of any kind is of value. And I'm not saying that to be politically correct. I mean, Anna Lemke, author of Dopamine Nation, when I asked her a similar question, she said, the key is like for young people who are quote unquote looking for their passion, like she thinks that's a crazy idea. It's never going to work. She thinks what you should do is look around you and find something. I know this sounds crazy, but it makes perfect sense in the context of the biology. Find something that needs fixing or doing. Maybe it's mow the lawn. Maybe it's assemble the fish tank that's been piled up in the corner. Do something that has a beginning, a middle, and end where you can feel like you accomplished something because it feeds back on the circuitry that you can accomplish things.
Is Hannah the one that has she done work in video games?
On video games, she was in that movie that was about, I think it was called The Social, was it not
Dilemma?
Social Dilemma.
I've had her on the show, but
yeah.
you also, I think, man, I could be conflating things, but there's another woman that I've had on the show that worked in game development.
Okay.
And
that's somebody different.
This sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
Beginning, middle, and end, sense of accomplishment. Because as a game dev, I will just tell you right now, and technically I'm not a game dev, I always say that, but hopefully people know what I mean. That is, you're literally going, how's the brain wired? How do I leverage that to make this engaging, enjoyable? Like you're obsessing over when do we get them to secrete dopamine so that they want to keep pushing. I mean, it's all very conscious stuff that game developers are doing. So how do we, because 100%.
Yeah, do something.
They could do that something that other people are going to look at and be like, that's what you're pointing yourself at? Like that is lunacy. It'll still have the same sense of accomplishment. We'll be back to the show momentarily, but let's talk about why founders burn out before they ever succeed. You started a business to be great at one thing. Instead, you became mediocre at everything. Designer, copywriter, photographer, marketer, inventory manager, customer service rep. You're not an entrepreneur. You are a one-man circus. Successful founders focus on what they're great at and let experts handle the rest. And now Shopify gives you access to world-class expertise without needing to hire a team. Their AI writes compelling product descriptions and headlines, their templates create beautiful stores that convert, and their tools handle inventory management, international shipping, and returns automatically. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. Stop wearing every hat and start building your empire. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/impact. Now let's get back to the show. Is mowing the lawn better than running a 4K?
Yeah, so it's all important and they can all be done because we're talking about things that are sort of beginning, middle, end, done. So, this whole notion of wake up in the morning and make your bed, right?
Jordan Peterson.
Right, and clean your room, right? Or
Who are you gonna say?
McChrystal, I think, was the first. Make your bed first thing in the morning.
He's a general, right?
So, a former Navy SEAL. I think this was at a commencement for University of Texas, Austin. The whole idea there, he framed it as, you get back at the end of the day, and even if your day went terribly, at least your bed is made. Okay, I think, with all due respect, I think the practice itself is far more valuable than that from the perspective of you were able to take something that was disorganized and organize it and then move forward. So it's not like you make your bed all day 50 times. It's that you have the ability to act on your environment and complete something. Then you pivot and you look for the next thing that needs to be done. Now, you could spend all day doing chores. People do this when they're procrastinating, right? They start doing all sorts of things they haven't tended to in the previous days and weeks. But the idea is that if you can organize your immediate physical environment, then there is that quote unquote sense of accomplishment, but it's more a sense of that you have an ability to accomplish things, right? So it is hard to imagine someone whose home space is slovenly, who's super effective in the outside world. Hard to imagine. I'm sure it exists, but they probably have maids, right? So taking control of your environment, keeping the things that you have in order, taking good care of the things that you have, however few, has a feedback on you. It's a self-respect thing. It allows you to feel like you can control what's in your environment. And again, the circuitries that we're talking about related to dopamine, motivation, and pursuit, they are subject to plasticity. And what you're talking about when you're talking about OnlyFans is plasticity in the direction of hijacked plasticity, where you're getting less and less dopamine, less and less pleasure, and you're investing more and more. It's literally the circuit is being hijacked, and it's atrophying in certain important ways, and it's hypertrophying, it's growing in other ways that are beneficial to OnlyFans and destructive to you. When you make your bed, it's probably neutral. Is it destructive to you? No. No. Is it super beneficial to you? No. I'm not delusional. I don't think that making your bed first thing in the morning or cleaning your room is going to completely transform your life. But it's also what you're not doing during that time, right? It's a pure behavioral replacement. So then you go out and you run, you get some sunlight, you hydrate. It's these things, they start to ratchet on top of one another. Now, is that going to make somebody confident enough to go out and ask a girl out on a date? No, but probably more confident about her, maybe eventually coming back to your apartment and seeing the place, and it's not a total disaster. And as we know, she'll be looking to see how you maintain your stuff. So I think that people who learn how to take control of their immediate external environment, this is the essence of building confidence. I really believe that. When we're little kids, we make something with our Legos or whatever it is, and we show our parents. They go, "Good job," and then pretty soon we realize they say a good job to anything, right? Unless it's like really exceptional. What the pivotal moment I believe in, at least in my childhood, is when I did something I looked at and I was like, "That's awesome." Like I used to design fish tanks when I was a kid, and I was pretty bad at it. Now I'm really good at it. I have a couple, and I'll just say, like, I'll go toe to toe with anybody on Aquaria.
Fish tanks?
Yeah, man, aquascaping.
How big are we talking?
We're talking big fish tanks with coral and soon an octopus and
Could
discus
I lay
fish.
inside of it?
What's that?
Could I lay inside of it?
Yeah, one of them.
That big?
Yeah, some of them are 300 gallons or more. And the idea is the balance between the fish and the aquarium. If you really want your mind blown, go and look at Takashi Amano. He did what's called aquascaping, which was these underwater. He had ones that were as big as this room. Unfortunately, he died in pneumonia at 60. But he has a whole museum dedicated to him.
Did you know him?
No, I wanted to meet and apprentice with him, and he died before I was able to.
That's
But
so
am I going to become a fish tank designer? No, I don't plan
Aren't
to.
you already? You just said
well,
go toe to toe.
as a profession,
Sure, but
it's very important to me that I have a certain thing. Like I get so much joy and like positive stimulation and ideas from just sitting in front of that thing. And so for me, it's very important that those spaces in my house are not just like empty spaces, and for some people it's painting, and for some people it's gardening. And, these are more artistic things. Right now, we're not talking about like going out and like conquering markets or like, yes, I also go to the gym, and yes, I also run. I do those things that are more like traditional male, masculine things. But just the idea that you can touch into a feeling of like, I did that. Is this generative drive, as it's called, like the touching into that where it was a job well done.
Yep.
And no one's looking, right? I don't care if anyone ever sees my fish tanks, frankly. Like no one's looking. They give me energy, and they give me energy because I love them, and because it's hard to do a tank right, and it's hard to keep the balance right and the ecosystem right. But it feels so damn good. Now, I'm not saying everyone should go out and get fish tanks, right?
No. But you're really onto something.
There.
I want to pitch you an idea.
Yeah.
I want to see if I'm thinking about this right, because I am really obsessed with this. So I think AI is going to terraform the world in ways that people do not understand. I think it is going to be devastating in 1,000 ways, and I think it's going to be unbelievably cool in 1 billion ways. Going to be hard to get through the ways that it's going to be tough, but when I think about that, I start thinking about, okay, what's going to be the future? I start thinking from an evolutionary lens. What does evolution want from us? I'll assume for now that we're not altering the structure of the brains. And I'll say, we're going to keep working the way that we work. And when I hear you describe that, I hear the very thing that excites me about game development. Because I'm like, oh, forget aquariums and needing to actually put glass in your house and all that. I'll give you the ability to design an entire ocean. I'll give you the ability to design an entire universe. And I think that people are going not only to design them, but explore them. And so then people start going, well, they're going to poo-poo that and say, okay, but that is just a video game. It's like, when I hear you say, I don't care if anybody ever sees my fish tank, I'm like, oh, this is a gamer. There's a certain type of game that you like. It's like you design these farms and stuff like this. It's an actual type of game. It's a whole genre. And I'm like, oh, I get it. But there does seem to be some bridge that society is not comfortable with us crossing, where it becomes virtual. So an esports athlete, they're unbelievable. They are so skilled that the window that they can be the best in the world is so narrow. By 24, you're like washed up because your reaction time is off by like 1 thousandth
These are
of a
gamers.
second. Yeah,
I went to a gaming
insane.
tournament, actually. with one of the kids I was describing earlier. It was his birthday years ago, and he said, "Well," I was like, "What do you want?" He wanted to go to a gaming tournament. It was here in LA, and it was wild. I mean, this is going to be familiar to you and everyone else. The kids had like hand warmers, and then the audience, instead of clapping, they were like banging together these like styrofoam things, and it was like a whole thing. And this girl walked in. I think she's probably like, like mid-20s, like really attractive woman. All the dudes were like, no way. And they were like fanning out on this chick. And he's like, she's so hot. And I was like, okay, this is a totally different world.
It's a different universe.
But here's the thing, the fish tanks or the video game or the virtual version of the fish tank farming or whatever it is, the real key for me anyway, or at least my understanding of it is the energy and inspiration and kind of sense of capability that I get from that. It's not a closed loop. I don't sit in front of my fish tank all day just going like, man, I'm a good fish tank designer. Like I'm the next Takashi Amano. No, none of that. I take the energy of it and I take it into my profession. I take it into my creative pursuits that relate to the podcast or to writing. And I've got a few other things that are brewing now.
How?
What's that?
How?
It's purely energetic. It's like I can accomplish things. Like I can build a really awesome home environment.
See, okay.
I used to do this, like now I converted an art gallery into a living space. Like that's kind of my obsession right now.
I want to study your brain for science.
But when I lived in a 1-bedroom studio, I did this.
Yeah.
I had a plant, I had my TV. I would think, I'm not like an interior designer, but I was like, how can I make this place like the best study environment? This was in college. And I was like, chair, desk, that back then it was like tape and CD. And I had like little posters and I kept really good care of everything I had. And that place is where I built my degree, which led to my master's, my PhD, running a lab, getting tenure, the podcast, sitting here with you. And so for me, back then I had no idea what a podcast was. It was in the mid 90s, right? But that room was so important to me. Like that's my whatever, dojo, that's my canvas. Like and I just trusted and I still trust that if something is closed loop, it's dangerous.
When you say closed loop, what do you mean?
I mean,
exactly?
that whatever energy you get from it is discarded in the thing. I'm gonna get kind of.
But why? So okay,
let's talk about OnlyFans.
No, don't leave yet because I really want to understand this, and I want to understand if we're saying the same thing or just wildly different things. So I believe that all of human existence, there's nothing outside of what I'm about to say. All of human existence is us trying to manipulate our own brain chemistry. Period. No parentheticals, no new chapters. Okay. Everything that we do, I think that evolution has made that just obviously true because evolution is trying to compel you to do a thing and it only has pleasure and pain.
To propagate it. I mean, evolution has an end game, right?
Which is to have kids itself. To have kids.
And, yeah, right.
Full stop.
Right. I mean,
do we agree?
Species want to make more of themselves and protect their young.
Yep.
Period. Yeah.
But like, period.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I agree with you.
I work backwards from that. I'm like, evolution has a goal and I'm its vessel. Evolution wants to make sure that I have kids that survive long enough to have kids. Everything is just trying to get me to do that. The thing that it is using to get me to do that is all the neurochemistry stuff that you actually understand. And then me, whether I'm drinking alcohol, doing drugs, having sex, whatever, I have been given a set of circuitry, whatever your chemical processing plant, however you want to think about it. And I can do things to yank those levers that make me feel a certain way. And then all of us are just yanking those levers. Now, the thing that you and I are getting onto is you're saying, okay, there's a way that you can pull those levers where the energy goes inside and dies. And there's a way that you can pull those levers so that energy somehow does a new thing. And that new thing is what I want you to explain because you may be able to put your finger because there are two things I'm going to be attacked in the future. I'm not super attacked by it right now because not enough people know that I believe it. But over time, they're really going to come after me for it. While it won't happen to everybody. Transhumanism is going to be a thing, and I'm totally supportive of it.
How is that defined? I'm not sure I know exactly.
We'll merge with machines.
Got it. Okay.
Will alter our biology. It'll be one of those two things or both.
Gene editing.
Yep.
Robots, nanorobots.
Correct.
I mean, I think I'm an easy sell on this, but yeah, 100% that's going to happen.
For sure.
I mean, it's happening now.
But I'm supportive of it. That's where I think I'm going to lose certainly the religious crowd. And the second thing is that I really believe that going out into space is cool, and I'm glad some people are doing it. But the reason that aliens don't visit us is any sufficiently advanced society will develop technology where they collapse inside of virtual worlds. It's the only thing that makes sense. because you don't have to worry about altering your physical body in terms of dealing with radiation and stuff like that. It's just so much, you don't have to bend space-time. You can literally just create a virtual world. So I want to create virtual worlds. I am obsessed. It's not what I'm known for, but it's the thing that I'm obsessed with.
I can tell.
But on this, I want to make sure that I'm not putting people in a box where their energy dissipates into nothing.
Got it.
And I've done a thing now that doesn't make me respect myself. I'm already rich. I am not doing this for the money. I'm doing it because I'm like, yo, this is where we're going. This thing is incredible, but only if done right. And so now, tell me more about the fish tank and why the energy like rebounds into something else, so I can make sure, one, that I continue to point my life towards things like that, and that as I'm building, because I feel what you're talking about, but I wouldn't be able to articulate it.
Well, first of all, you and I are completely aligned on this evolutionary argument that our brain circuitries and bodily chemistries are organized around evolution, and that the innate, even if unconscious or conscious awareness that we're trying to propagate our species and just go forward. There are a lot of traps, as I'll call them, these things that can hijack us. Like opium will hijack the pleasure centers and ruin your life. We've seen that. It's all about what it does and what it no longer makes you want to do. Okay? It makes people on opium, they just don't care to work. They don't care to do anything, right? It's just a slippery slope, as they say. Here's why the fish tanks are more than a hobby, and they're more than a fascination. And here's why it's different than OnlyFans. Okay.
Why fish tanks are different than OnlyFans?
Yeah, there are a lot of reasons why my aquariums are different than OnlyFans, especially the way I'm interacting with them, just to be clear. But here's the difference. And I'm going to use an example that might seem a little bit crude, but I think it captures it best. Let's be honest. People aren't just watching OnlyFans. They're masturbating while they watch OnlyFans.
I hope, for their sake, Jesus.
That presumably involves some pleasure or generates some pleasure for them. I certainly am not of the belief that all sex and masturbation is just about reproduction, right? Obviously, masturbation is not the most efficient way to reproduce. Yeah. Okay,
try a different method.
Yeah, right? Exactly. So, but let's just imagine, and it's not pleasant to imagine, but I think we can all know the general contour of this, so I don't have to say too much. Someone's watching OnlyFans, a guy's watching OnlyFans, he's paying, he's telling her what he wants, she's giving it to him, there's an exchange of money, there's an exchange of time, okay? He's spending his dopamine, and he's literally spending it, and then masturbation, right? And then what happens after that? Is the net increase in dopamine, testosterone, going to cause him to go out and look for a real date? No,
definitely not.
No. Has he invested his biological resources in DNA, in his sperm, in reproduction and evolution of our species? No.
Definitely not.
Is he a contributing member of society? Well, to her bank account, yeah. And to
he's part of GDP?
Right. It's not like taking an Uber where like Uber takes a slice, but you actually go someplace in the car. He stayed right there. He actually spent out his God-given, nature-given, evolutionary-given, whatever your beliefs are, gifts there, and guess where it went? Nowhere. It's a net negative. Okay, now let's talk about my fish tanks. Okay.
Now, do you think that evolution has some sort of backdoor punishment for that?
It depends on the extent to which society will pick up the slack, because we know that throughout societies there have been people who have been opiated, who can't work, that we support. Sometimes we support those people for good reason. They're not able to support. They're out on disability from a workplace injury. Societies have mechanisms set up. But if you look at thriving societies, right? I mean, a certain threshold number of males and females getting out there and doing work and educating young. And and here it really does take a village. It takes men and women, and there really needs to be shift workers, which is terrible for your health, but we need those people, right? So we need contributing members of society. The more things that we offer for people to opt out, and they don't even realize that they're opting out of the evolutionary game, but being under the illusion that they're somehow doing the right thing, and they sort of know they're not, but they're receiving all the pleasure that evolution has installed into these circuits, but they're not doing anything. They're not actually contributing. Forget, quote unquote, contributing to society. That's really important. They're not even contributing to their own life in a meaningful way. Sooner or later, they have to make the money that they're going to contribute to OnlyFans. I doubt anyone wants to see that guy on OnlyFans. I mean, there presumably are people, but I don't think that's the end game. So what I mean when I say like the fish tanks are like the inverse of all that is, I have the tank, which helps me, feel like I can do something. It's somewhat mindless. I might listen to a book or a podcast while I'm doing it. I might enjoy it for pleasure, but I get energy from there that I take elsewhere. It's not like I'm like, I'm going to start like, podcasting about fish, although here I am. But it is not my goal. I'm not going to start like an aquascaping podcast. They're amazing aquascapers. That's not my goal.
Right.
The idea is it gives me energy. And this is what, my good friend, and I'm sure, I always seem to mention him, and, forgive me for name dropping, but Rick Rubin really understands about the creative process that he talked about in The Creative Act. There's another book by a woman by the name of Twyla Tharp, who's in her 80s, who's an absolutely incredible choreographer. And she talks about how her process of going to the gym in the morning for 2 hours, she was a ballerina every single morning, the process of going to museums, the process of having a regimen, all of that is designed to give her the kind of raw materials in her unconscious that then she can put into being, and she is one of the greatest choreographers of all time. Anyone that pays attention to the dance world, which isn't my world, but they'll know her name. And so the idea is, what are the things that you are doing that you get energy from that you can transmute into useful work, being a better husband, being a better son, being a contributing member of society. Maybe it is the old-fashioned version of like you go check on the neighbor and you like give them some cookies or something like that, and they like it, and you feel like you've done something useful, and you have. The problem is the things that where you think you've done something useful and you haven't, and you actually have moved back 2 steps. You didn't not just go anywhere, you're actually drifting down because some of your peers are moving forward. Mm-hmm. I want to just briefly mention that there is a parallel argument against the evolutionary theory that is not the one that people typically think of, and this is the scariest one of all. And I just want to share it with you because I think it's a fun one and it's scary as shit. Which is, you now know about the gut microbiome. Yep. We have trillions of little microbacteria living in our gut. They help us manufacture serotonin. They're talking to our brain. They're informing about our body chemistry. They're controlling our immune system. Super important system involved in everything from mental health to physical health, inflammation. There's an argument that's been made by the people that study the microbiome that we, in our infinite desire to think that we know everything, have come up with this thing that we call evolutionary theory. But actually, we are just vehicles for microbiota. I came here today, I shook your hand, I sat in one of your chairs. Elon wants to go to Mars. And guess what? The people that are proponents of this theory argue that, it's kind of cool. Humans think that they're going to Mars to colonize Mars, which I believe that they do, but that the microbiota just really wanted to get there. So there's this, they like create changes in our neurochemistry, which create changes in our thinking. This is a kind of fun theory that lead us to think that we're leading these meaningful lives and like propagating our species, but really we've already been hijacked from the inside.
Yeah, that's wild.
And there's no sense that there's intention around it, like that they're sitting there going, let's get some guys to play video games and interact with OnlyFans and let's adjust the numbers of people by lowering reproductive rates. Like there isn't that idea that they have that kind of consciousness. But anyone who's studied evolutionary theory knows that evolution doesn't sit back in a chair and think about it. This is just it's the statistics of outcomes that drive this.
The blind watchmaker.
That's exactly. So I offer that as kind of a fun and scary example. That's the one that keeps me up late at night, where I go like, oh shit, what if I'm just a microbiota vehicle? Because you can't really destroy this theory. There's like no hole that you can poke in it that dissolves it completely. It's scary as hell.
They better stop the AI from coming on board because I don't think the AI is going to need a microbiome. So
that might be
the one catch is they done messed up,
Yeah.
Andrew.
Couldn't resist offering that one. It's not the theory I subscribe to.
No, I love it. And look,
but it's counter creation. It's like the opposite of a master plan, right? It's this idea that we think that we're so clever and we're doing all this stuff and we're just like meat vehicles that think we think in important ways for the microbiota. Super scary. I hope that's not true. But
there's certainly an element. Did you read Sapolsky's book, Determined?
No.
Oh my God.
I spoke to him about it but basically he told me to my face, there's no free will. Basically, that's the idea.
Oh, yeah. Bro, he literally leaves no stone unturned. Just when you think, I gotcha. Nope, he's like, yeah, there's a chapter on that. Trust me, by the end of it, you're going to be like, oh yeah, we are automata.
Yeah, he's sharp as a razor.
You literally just have to let go of that it matters. And I'm like, look, I believe we really are automata and that it just doesn't matter. And
really?
dude, if you read the book, you're going to be like, there's no wiggle room. There's nothing left. And to be honest, even before I read the book, I believe we were automata because I can manipulate your brain so completely to make you, the Phineas Gage story, like you alter the structures of the brain, the person will be forever different. I don't even understand people that think that we could be anything other than automata. We are limited by our biology.
Oh yeah.
And so it's like, if you don't think we are, then go to somebody who's profoundly retarded and tell them to solve for physics. They are not going to be able to. It is not physically possible for them. The structures of their brain are such, that's just not within the realm of possibility. And so it's like, okay, well, if I'm limited by my biology, then I am my biology. If I am my biology, where exactly is free will sitting? So anyway, I'll never be able to do the job that he does in that book. It is so detailed all the way down to anybody right now at home that's thinking, well, Tom's ignoring quantum, or he has a chapter on the ridiculousness of thinking that that's the same as free will. He'll walk you through it.
Are you familiar? There are these really interesting studies by a guy named Robert Heath, very controversial neurosurgeon back in I think it was the 70s and 80s. Basically, he ran studies in humans where he stimulated different brain areas during neurosurgery. And he had this one experiment, very few subjects, but his human experiment, his hard experiment, so there's still value in what he found, which was people get different brain areas stimulated, and then different sensations come about, and they get to sort of report what they liked the most or the least, which brain area and which sensation it was associated with. So you stimulate the brain area associated with sexual pleasure, and they really like that. With laughter, they really like that. With drunkenness, some like that, some don't, and on and on. The brain area that they like and will work to stimulate, self-stimulate more than any other brain area, this is gonna blow your mind, is an area of the thalamus called the medial midline. It's a midline thalamus, a little structure. It doesn't really matter what the structure is called. And the subjective experience was one of mild frustration and anger.
Humans are hilarious.
Humans are hilarious.
Yep.
And you wonder why everyone gets on X. And it's just like, good morning, let's fight.
Yeah. I've talked about this before because I have a very low anger response and my wife has a very fast one. And so when I click over into it, I'm like, oh, it feels really good. There's so much certainty in anger. I am right, they are wrong. And that sense of, I know exactly how the world should be, and I know exactly now how to move forward and how to react. There's just so much
it
clarity.
Clarifies.
Yes.
Sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
No,
we said the
perfect.
same word at the same time, so we do in stereo. That it seems like it clarifies so much of our understanding, and maybe or our experience. Maybe that's what the whole thing about organizing your room, aka Jordan Peterson, or Make Your Bed, McChrystal, or these things of running. The number of people that I know who were addicts who got sober by just running a lot is pretty spectacular, and stay sober.
Are they just clicking over the obsessive nature and giving it something else?
Probably. It's linear, it's forward, it's quantifiable, it has a lot of the elements of kind of great replacement behavior. I mean, it can be taken to the extreme, but I think, like Rich Roll's example, right? I'm not saying, I don't think Goggins is an addict, but I mean, the guy just keeps running. Cameron Haynes, right? Just beast, right? Just runs and runs and runs. He's able to drop alcohol, never go back. Running for sake of hunting, for sake of family and providing. These things tend to ratchet into one another in ways that we feel really functional. And people like to point fingers and say, well, that's all excessive. What would you rather have people doing?
Yeah,
just there on OnlyFans, or I think we're getting back to a place where some of the kind of core stereotypical circuitries and drives in males, I mean, these exist in females too, but in males are really being celebrated again or encouraged again, because we need functioning members of society.
For sure.
I'm curious how you see AI playing into, I'm not an expert in AI, but for somebody, for instance, who, is interested in creating things, I mean, where, aside from just searching in AI, what do you see coming next that people like me and everybody out there don't quite see yet in terms of the next iteration of where we're going to be like, everybody's using this?
It's easy to think like a sci-fi writer. And so that's always the best way, I think, to come at it. I like to remind people right before I make crazy predictions that the only thing I know is that nobody sees the future clearly. It will unfold in a way that is surprising, guaranteed. So everything I'm about to say, I say knowing that. I'm going to be wrong. So the only question is, will I be directionally correct? AI is the ultimate pattern recognition machine. And it may never become human-like, but it is going to extend life radically. It is going to be better than us at everything. It'll be a better therapist. It'll be a better husband. It will be a better wife. Like it will be so good because, remember, go back, my core thesis is that all of life, full stop, is about manipulating my own brain chemistry in alignment with what evolution wants, which is for me to have kids. But as you said, it's easy to hijack that. So AI will be so extraordinarily good at recognizing the patterns that we operate under. It will know exactly how to make us feel anger, if that's what we want to feel, clarity, certainty, laughter, sadness, whatever. The patterns will be so easy for it to replicate. Now, this is going to be over time, obviously. So I think the thing that maybe surprises everybody, the world will bifurcate. And so on the one hand, you're going to have people like me. You go full transhuman, you are thrilled to be able to live out a 1,000-year life inside of virtual worlds where you are fighting dragons and exploring planets, and it will legitimately be unbelievably cool. Then on the other hand, you have people that will be deeply religious and will see people that basically become a different kind of entity as an affront to God. There will be violence, and how bad that violence gets will largely be determined by how economically disruptive the switch over to what will inevitably be a post-capitalist, post-scarcity world. Because one of the big things that I think AI is going to do, and just as a reminder to everybody, this won't play out like this. This is merely directional. That it will almost certainly drive energy costs to zero. And as soon as you drive energy costs to zero and have a first run of robotics, which are already coming off the line, so this will happen, you have free labor infinitely. And so that means that the only thing you're up against is resources. You could theoretically eventually run out, but given our birth rates are so terrible, I don't think that's going to be the problem. So you can have anything you want, anytime you want, and it will so profoundly break our meaning and purpose circuitry, which I think are essentially all that matter in a human life, that's where I come back around to, game development is going to become a whole thing because people will need meaning and purpose, but they'll have everything they need. So how do you create something that is sufficiently difficult, very engaging and enjoyable, but also hard, and it makes you scale and push and all of that. And video games quite literally have optimized themselves perfectly to that endeavor. And the technology is now getting so good that you can create worlds that get bigger and bigger and bigger and more nuanced and complex over the years. There are games now that are being developed for 5 or 6 years before they launch. And then there's one game called No Man's Sky that's in its 10th year post-launch, just getting better. It's crazy.
That's wild.
So now we have to be careful. So much of it, again, it's never going to play out like the way that I just described it. I'm going to be as surprised as anybody else. But in terms of what we can understand today, what do the trajectories look like? What are the things we have to worry about? You have to worry about meaning and purpose. You really do have to figure out what does the world look like on the other side of capitalism. Capitalism is the only economic system that works. I'll fight anybody on that one, and have started. So it's going to be a fascinating future, but rocky.
Wild. I want to just offer up a potential model, mostly for your thoughts, but it's one that I believe very strongly in. And there is some evidence to support this is true, which is the timescales over which we are used to getting reward and linking effort with reward. I've said before on this podcast and others, beware of any kind of thing that allows you to engage with it seamlessly without effort. Anything that brings you reward or dopamine without effort that precedes it, even a little bit, is very dangerous. It's very likely you're being hijacked. Okay.
I think there might be more to that because every time I hear you say that, I think of, I don't know if you know what a Souls-like game is. They're absurdly difficult. And there was a guy that did a whole video series about how his dad's first video game ever was, I think it was Dark Souls, but anyway, it was a Souls-like game. And the caption is, my dad's first game that he ever beat was Dark Souls, and it changed him. And the video is pretty cool of this guy like talking about how many lessons about life that it taught him and how to get better at something that you literally have. He didn't even know how to move in 3-dimensional space in a video game when he started, because he was in his like 60s, if I remember right. So anyway, so I look at that and I go, I have a feeling though, people don't mean that. I don't think you mean games.
No, well, it could be games. I think that,
could it? Like, is there something, this whole fish tank thing, where it's like your real thing was it easy? Your real thing was, did it give you energy that you carry somewhere else?
Right. And it's reasonably hard, not extremely hard, but it's reasonably hard to put together something that's sustainable, that looks really awesome, that like aesthetically is balanced and the chemistry is right. It's not easy. You can't just like throw a bunch of fish and plants and stuff in and I've helped with it now, but I've done these for years. And so you have to have an understanding of how this stuff ratchets together. I think that from the time we're very little until the time we die, whenever that is, we're developing this sense of reward contingencies. Like, when you're little, your parents play peekaboo and you get a reward every time the hands open up, right? Then it's sort of object permanence. They know these, these are developmental milestones. Like, is the ball, you think the ball is behind there? Oh, the ball's here. Over time, what we call education involves longer and longer paths of effort and waiting before you get the reward. Either the surprise, it can be positive, neutral, or negative, any number of things. In video games, the sense of varying the duration of effort before you get a reward is very important. This is intermittent reinforcement, right? It's how it keeps you engaged. I'll be 50 next month. So I did a PhD, which took a while. It took me 4 years. I did a master's before that. And it was hard. Like, it involved a lot of hard work and I enjoyed the work. And I published some papers and I'm very proud of those papers, but those papers took a lot of time. So by the time I finished graduate school, because my papers took on average a couple of years from the time I started the first experiment until the time the paper was published, I had sort of a clock in my mind that like the meaningful rewards come about once every 2 or 3 years, not more frequently than that. Now, of course, there are other things I enjoy. I'd go snowboarding, do a good run, or date with my girlfriend and I enjoy that. So there are other things too. But in terms of where I was really putting a ton of mission and purpose effort, and then when was the outcome? You sold a company, made a lot of money. You put your heart and soul and a ton of effort into that company. Yeah, you see it on, yeah, absolutely. And so that set you up to be able to do hard things over long periods of time. I think that we develop a kind of core understanding based on our experience and what we engage in of how much effort we're willing to put in before we get a reward. OnlyFans, I think, is a very predictable get reward quickly type scenario where people in what we call entrain, their circuits start to match to that expectation, so that reading one page of a real book feels like a real haul. Reading a whole chapter of a book feels like a real haul. Reading a whole book feels like a massive expenditure. And in the age of TikTok, where you're used to getting these dopamine rewards very quickly, it's not just the number, but it's the speed at which we sort of expect novelty. And so one thing that I think is very clear, that like people of our generation, since we're similar in age, we're accustomed to putting in effort over long periods of time without the expectation that the reward should have happened yesterday or the day before. Yeah. The longer period of time over which you can extend your notion of where effort and reward are linked, kind of the time bin, I think the more powerful you are as a human being. Yeah. I mean, Elon, there's a reason why Elon is the richest person in the world. Yes, he's brilliant. You may disagree with his politics. Many people do. But let's be honest. The guy's willing to play the long game. Jesus. I remember, because I was a postdoc at that time, when the Tesla shop opened up in Menlo Park, Palo Alto, and then it disappeared. I remember the early failures of like come and go. I remember seeing those cars, then they kind of disappeared. And then now you see them everywhere. And now they themselves are a controversial thing. But, and then it's the rock. So he's used to doing quote unquote hard things. But the part about hard things that we don't often think about that we can teach ourselves is long bouts of effort over long periods of time, leading to some sort of reward that then maybe we export to something else like the fish tanks. Maybe it's a degree. Like, what's the value of a 4-year degree? In my opinion, yes, you learn some things, but the more important thing is that you expended effort and it took you 4 years. So you learn, I can work for 4 years for something that may or may not actually be of value in today's day and age. I still think it's of value. I am university professor after all.
Let's say you're doing okay for yourself.
I'm doing okay. Yeah. I mean, not everyone needs a degree. I think that there are people who are brilliant mechanics and engineers and programmers that did not need to do that. So I don't think it's the universal path for everybody. But I do think anyone could do this exercise. They could say, how like how long can I wait while expending effort? How many days? How many weeks? Like how durable am I in terms of investing effort for an outcome that may or may not be certain? It may not be zero. I know it won't be zero, but it's probably not going to be $1 billion, but it could be.
Yeah.
So the value that you got from that intense effort, was that in your 20s?
We sold in my 30s.
Yeah. So I think there's something uniquely valuable about one's 20s and 30s because you're so filled with energy. You're sort of at the optimal end of health. Not when you're a kid.
Especially for guys, you can just feel there's something different
right.
about guys in their 20s and 30s.
Totally.
Like it is a very special window. Gentlemen, if you can hear my voice right now, do not waste that time.
It's raw energy.
It is it is a different game. Like even now, because I've had employees stay with me for long periods of time, young men, that you're watching them change. And there really is something about that whole, the 27 club of musicians that die at 27. There's something that happens right around there, 26, 27, 28, where you start looking at yourself going, did I do it or not? And there's a disillusionment of like the childishness with which you looked at the world begins to fade away and you really start to question yourself. And if you don't have defenses against the fact that nothing really matters, truly, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. You are just trying to yank the levers in your own brain. But the language I use to describe what you're talking about is nature does have a backdoor way of making certain things unpleasant, even though like masturbation, I've done my fair share and it's rad in the moment. And then immediately after, it doesn't feel like sex feels different. It feels more profound. I don't know what other word.
It's generative.
That's
good,
really interesting.
Good sex is generative. You get energy from it, even if you're relaxed. Well, you've also done something for the relationship.
Yeah, it feels ebullient. It's expansive. It's uplifting, in a way that masturbation isn't. Even though they both end in orgasm, and so I'm like, nature clearly recognizes the difference. Like I'm hijacking my reward system with masturbation. I'm hijacking it with sex, but in a way where it's like, yes, this is what I wanted you to do. So I'm going to give you that like extra long-term slow release sense of everything is okay. Not even okay, everything is good. You're moving in the right direction.
And it reinforces pair bonding, right? I mean, it brings you closer to the relationship.
But that feels good. That's what I'm saying.
That's what I mean.
There's like that slow release, because pair bonding, nature could have said, I don't give a fuck. And so like you get nothing from that. But it doesn't. It's like, this is rad. I want you to do this.
Yeah, you've done something useful.
Right.
You've done something useful. As opposed to, there's useful, there's not useful, and then there's net negative. And I think what's missed in these activities where where their dopamine systems are hijacked is they don't see that they're slowly slipping underwater. Now, I'm not here for total moral judgment, right? Like,
it's not moral judgment. I don't think you're putting that across. And
I hope not.
If I can get you to buy into this, all I'm trying to map for people is there are evolutionarily placed algorithms in your brain. If you do things that it wants, you will get this slow release, feel good. It's what I call fulfillment. If you do things that are fulfilling, and ironically or not, hard work is a part of what I consider to be nature's recipe for fulfillment. If you don't work hard, it won't work. You'll never get fulfillment. Nature needed to make sure you were willing to work hard because life was hard for millennia.
Yeah, even the children of very wealthy people who don't have to work hard for their wealth, these are not happy people.
1000%.
The ones that learn the family trade and do that, they can be happy people. But I've known a fair number of them. You can dissolve a human by giving them too many resources without requiring effort.
Preach.
And there's something in that. I agree. I think we're totally aligned in this. Mid to late 20s and 30s. That if there were a biological clock in men, it would be those years. Not because of lack of reproductive potential, but lack of generative drive potential. Because there's a feedback loop on it. Like I'm approaching 50, and I'm not saying this, as a boast. I put a lot of work into the working out and the sunlight and the thing and the researching, and I work a ton. Probably not as much as you, Tom, but a ton, and always have. And I feel better now than I did in my 30s. Probably because I take better care. Now, am I more prone to injury? Probably, and these kinds of things. But I'm stronger now. My endurance is better. My thinking process is sharper.
For sure.
And so I don't subscribe to this idea that it's a downhill slope,
Certainly
provided you put the work in early. Now, if somebody's in their mid to late 40s and they're hearing this, I still think you can catch some of the wave, but I think it's harder. I really do, and I think that you can do it, but it's very important that you understand that you better have something where you are investing over long periods of time. Now, people with families will immediately say, that thing is called kids. Well, and then I say, well, yes, applause to you because you are fulfilling your evolutionary
Nature
obligation.
is so happy with you.
Or request, evolutionary request to do this. So they're very happy with you. So I'm not saying that this has to come just from profession. But the things are related because families require resources. And so on and so forth. So
I always tell people, if you're not going to have kids, you better have a damn good reason. And I don't have kids, but I'm hyper aware that I have to account for that because it's what nature wants me to do. Mm-hmm. And so if I'm not going to do it, then I better find what the thing is that's going to give me meaning and purpose and all of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think we're totally aligned on this. I mean, I think we are, in contrast to the conversation we had a few years ago when we sat down here, I think we are now in a place where everyone is realizing that social media, wonderful, but has these real traps in it. First, we heard about the traps for mostly adolescent girls, Jonathan Haidt's work and so forth. Now we're hearing about the plight of boys and men. I mean, the New York Times just ran this thing about what boys and men need as opposed to what's wrong with them. They talked a little bit about what's wrong with them, but now they're entering the discussion about what they need, right? And how are we going to get functioning members of society that are men to catch up? Well, I think that it's the process of learning, like long-term investment. And it's funny because earlier I was asking you, like, what are your thoughts on crypto and investing? This is an area I'm really, wise to. It's kind of the same thing, right? You hear this from Warren Buffett, right? That you've got to play the long game, like especially with crypto, right? That thinking you can just get in and make a few bucks. You could probably do that. You could flip, but it's very hard to predict. It's very volatile.
5% of the wallets make 95% of the money. Good luck.
Is that right?
Yeah. Like, if you don't know how to invest, if you are not doing it around the clock, if you do not have a proven track record, then just be in the market for a very long time. Mm-hmm. Like, be broad, assume you know nothing, and just play a very long, and I'm talking like a 25-year game. Don't try to make your money off of some crazy shitcoin. Like that, this one breaks my heart. Economically, we have done the world a lot of dirt, and we are forcing them to gamble with assets. Long story that my audience will be very familiar with. But it's play the long game or you're toast.
Do you think that the crypto market and world is starting to resemble some of the OnlyFans-like contour of kind of like the allure, like come hither,
No, I think what it is it is hijacking the similar, like, okay, I know how especially the male brain works. You're trying to get access to females. Females respond to resources. So, hey, you don't understand why the financial system's broken, but you can feel something's wrong. And so now you just want to get rich as fast as you can because everything's out of reach. Come to this thing, and it's hijacking the gambling circuits. So I'm sure, like so much of them, you've talked about this. I literally learned this from you, but nature doesn't reinvent the circuitry, it's just recycling it. So I suppose in that way it is similar to OnlyFans, but it's what it attracts is gamblers. I learned this the hard way. So crypto is all about gambling, and it's an asset class. So if you know how to do it well, I think Bitcoin is real in terms of it will function more like a normal asset, like either an equity or gold. We'll see how it plays out in the long run, but it works as, you can think of it like gold, you can think of it like an equity. Either way, it's going up in value, but don't try to day trade, is basically my punchline there. But the get rich quick side of crypto is also very real, and whatever gambling speaks to, it speaks to that.
I have a friend, his name is Ryan Suave, and he's an expert in the addiction treatment world. He's trauma treatment as well, and he's worked with a lot of different types of addicts. And he told me once that the hardest addiction to break is gambling addiction, because in his words, the next one really could change it all. But then he told me something, I just want your reflections on it because I can't wrap my mind around this. He said, the crazy thing is, after gambling addicts have been at it for a long while and they've gone through their cycles of destruction and often replenishment again and then destruction, they start getting addicted to losing, which I cannot understand except from the perspective of perhaps it's an opportunity to win again. But
is it cutting? I mean, that's about the only thing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's self-loathing and to start out with, or maybe there's some sort of weird inversion of the pain-pleasure relationship with dopamine. We know that pain taps into the dopamine pathway. Maybe they're so hard-pressed.
Sensation of pain or actual pain?
Yeah, pain.
Whoa.
Actual pain. I mean, so maybe it's that their dopamine is so depleted from kind of winning, losing, that they now like pain is the only thing that will do it. I don't know, but I think
That's dark.
and I believe him. There's no reason for him to lie to me, and I'm not a gambling addict. I would tell you if I was, but and if I was a gambling addict, I'd probably tell you that if I was a gambling addict, I'd tell you if I was, but I'm not.
Fair, yeah.
But I think that, I do think there's something in that statement that if it's even a tiny bit true, might ratchet back to what we were talking about earlier related to the relationship between porn, OnlyFans, masturbation, this feeling of shame, this feeling of, what a waste of my time, of my money, of energy. I mean, the shame spiral is a real thing in addicts. It's something that repeats itself over and over again. And this is why they always say, addicts are most susceptible to relapse when they're at their peak of feeling great and whether at their bottom of feeling like absolute garbage.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So, again, these circuitries they're as you pointed out, they're wired for us to progress as a species. And knowing that in order for our species to progress, not everyone has to win and a lot of people can lose. Sometimes that's all I need to hear to remind myself that I want to be like in the winning lane.
Yes, please.
And what that requires these days more than anything is not participating in a ton of behaviors. It's so much more nowadays about what you choose to opt out of.
Facts.
And so when David Goggins says, nowadays it's so much easier or even easy, although I think easier is a perhaps more accurate way to put it, to be extraordinary, I think it's really mostly about what you don't do, what you're not doing with your time and energy. And so
that's part of it. As an entrepreneur, I'll say to anybody out there that wants to shine in this era, all you have to do is work like you're from the 80s, like period. Like there was another Gen Xer. We were like laughing our asses off at forgive me for anybody that's had to do it, but it's like when people are like, I need a mental health day. It's like, the fuck is that? So I'm not saying mental health is not a real thing. It is. I'm saying you need to have a relationship with your own mind where you are in control. And I find people like in the modern era, people just do not know how to get in control of their own minds. That is wild to me. So I don't know if it's just coming up. You're staring at a wall for like 80% of your life. And so you've got to find a way internally to get control of that process, to not be bored out of your mind or whatever, or the way that our parents raised us. I don't know, man. But like work ethic really is rare. It's just looked at differently.
Yeah. There was a time, people will be shocked to hear, but where if you missed your ex, if you pined for your ex, guess what? You couldn't know what they were doing. You couldn't text them. And thank goodness, because guess what you did? You went out and you did other things.
Yeah.
You didn't obsess about the relationship that you had like 2 years ago. You weren't like sussing out what they're doing or wondering if you this or that. Like you just moved forward. Yeah. You had no choice but to either stay still or move forward. And I think I love it. Work like it's in the 80s. I have a question. You sold your company for $1 billion. Yeah, it's a lot of money. Yeah. There've been a few instances on X and on Reddit where I've been kind of pulled into a conversation around somebody will sell their company for a ton of money, and they'll come out publicly and say, I feel suicidal. I don't know what's wrong with me. I'm super unhappy. I mean, everything we've said up until this point perfectly explains why that is. They were on a cycle of striving. That's where the dopamine was coming from. Now they've got the reward and like video game is over and they don't know what to do. And they aren't quite at the point where, and of course, as dopamine goes up, which inevitably happens on the day they see all that money in their bank account, it goes down in a proportional decrease, below baseline. Takes some time to come back up. So there's just a matter of time. But then, of course, it's a daunting thing if it took you, how long did it take you to build Quest?
If you count the company before it, which allowed us to fund it, 12 years.
Okay, so let's go for another 12 years. And yet you did that. So I'm interested, did you have a kind of postpartum, as they call it, kind of depression?
Literally not even a little bit.
So did you celebrate your win?
Sort of. The team never would have known what day we sold on because it was, I went to work like normal. My wife and I got in a fight over it.
Oh, really?
Because she's like, okay, what do you want to do now? Because it was like happened early in the morning. And we had the call where it's like 18 bankers and confirm, because they're literally going to push a button. It's going to send you a lot of commas and zeros. And so they do it, boom, money hits. You're sitting there, refresh on your banking app. It hits. You're like, holy hell. And we actually took a photo of the moment where it like hit. And I've got my fist up in the air and I'm like, oh my God, like we're actually rich. This is wild. And she was like, okay, what are we doing now? I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm going to work. And so she was very surprised. And then when I left Quest, like left last day was a Monday. Impact Theory, I started the next day on Tuesday. So I didn't take a day off. And the reason is because I learned the lesson about money back at the company before that. So we'd started a company called Awareness Tech. Okay. And I thought that's what was going to make me rich. Ended up being totally miserable. Long story. I end up like, I go in and quit. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. This is like a nightmare. And they pull me back and are like, listen, we're unhappy too, but what are we going to need to do to stay together? And so outline what ends up becoming Quest. And so that becomes the thing that keeps us all together, was the thing that we would do, and it wasn't about money. So that was me going, well, I'm never going to do anything again for money because I'm worth $2 million at the time. And I'm so profoundly unhappy. If I was worth $20 million, I wouldn't care. If I was worth $1 billion, I wouldn't care. I don't want to feel like this. And so I was like, okay, this is why people tell you that money can't buy happiness. And so it was, thankfully, I learned that in my late 20s and then didn't get wealthy until my late 30s. So I had figured out, oh, this is a game of meaning and purpose. The only thing that matters is meaning and purpose. Heard, got it. So I'll never make that mistake. So when we sold the company, I was like, the only thing that matters is pursuit. That is my drug of choice. So when I say I'm ambitious, what I mean is I always want to pursue something gigantic. And the getting it, because now I've got it, the getting it is cool, but that's going to wear off and I'm going to get used to it. We're recording this in a nice fancy house and we have guests that are staying with us. So I'm seeing it now through their eyes again. And I'm like, oh, that's right. I live in some crazy mansion. But you really, doesn't matter. Like, you're going to get numb to anything. And so meaning and purpose is the only thing that's going to see you through. Like, working your ass off in service of making progress, which actually is the only thing that matters. Attaining it doesn't. But making progress towards a goal that is what I call honorable. So it serves you and other people. And if you're doing that, life's going to be okay. The second you stop doing that, nature is going to reach inside your brain and say, this is not good.
Man, I love it. You managed to avoid one of the biggest traps. I mean, I grew up in Silicon Valley. I had some friends who've done incredibly well financially with companies, and they all report the same low on sale, or a health issue comes along and they realize that they've been just destroying themselves health-wise. And
they haven't watched enough of your content.
That's right.
I'm not kidding, because for real, the gift you are giving to the world is that people can actually come to understand their biology. And so if I can get people to understand, look, I know this feels dark when you first think about it, but you're an automata. So these are all just processes that are running. But you feel very much like you're in control. Awesome. It's a great feeling. I'm glad I have it. So I'm not going to abuse that. So then I'm like, I am going to be present in this body, feeling the way that this body interfaces with the world. So I need to take that seriously. And so if I know that sex is awesome but momentary, relationships are hard but the greatest thing that life has to offer you, requited love, it's probably the right way to think about it, that a family, kids, like huge emotional incentives. So don't do that at your peril. Like, you have to be very careful with that. I'm always going to want to pursue no matter how much I achieve. And the way I explain that to people is you'll never have a meal so satisfying that you'll never need to eat again. You'll never have sex so good that you'll never want to have sex again, right? So you're never going to have an accomplishment so big that you don't want to pursue again. So just meaning and purpose is nature's way of continuing to push you forward and make life worth living. If you don't have that, suddenly life stops being worth living. And the question I used to ask myself all the time was, how many billionaires have to commit suicide before I accept that money won't be the answer? And so then it's just like, oh, okay, cool. These are all knowable things. I'm just going to act in accordance.
I mean, it's remarkable that you're able to see information and make sense of it and apply it. I think a lot of people can see information, make sense of it, and they're less effective at applying it. I mean,
I have just suffered more, perhaps. Like, I've been so dumb and suffered so much because of my stupidity that I'm literally just trying to be like, okay, look, I do dumb shit all the time. I would just like to not repeat the dumb stuff.
Doing dumb shit is part of that SRY gene too.
Much to my dismay.
It's just part of like hitting yourself with the rock, and then hitting that person, and then throwing the rock. I mean, I definitely, I think that in building a life, as they say, right? I think what you talk about in terms of meaning and purpose, it's something that if somebody doesn't know exactly what it is, it can feel a little bit overwhelming. Like, how do I find my meaning? How do I find my purpose? And I really do believe that it starts with the immediately actionable things that you at least know are not net negative. They can be neutral or they can be positive, but at least they're not net negative. I have this diagram, and I'm almost embarrassed to share it, but turning 50, I've been working my ass off for a long time and really enjoying it and loving it. And I share this only because I think it might be useful to people. I realize that I get up in the morning, I do the sunlight, I do the hydration, I get some exercise, I take care of myself in the ways I describe on the podcast. But I have this little drawing that keeps me in line and keeps me in healthy pursuit. And it's basically a picture I like to draw. I sometimes put my drawings on Instagram, but maybe I'll put this one someday. It's just basically like a giant ball of razor wire in the middle. And then on the other side of that razor wire is like a road, and I'll have like writing, book, podcast, like learning, reading papers, meditation, exercise, although I like to exercise. So like all the things that lie on the other side of this really, it takes effort to get over there. I think some people think I just like wake up and I'm like, go, do, 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 do. I used to be like that. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and just start working and then fall back asleep in my 20s and 30s. Now it's a bit more of a battle, and I used to get upset with myself. What changed? Well, on either side of that razor wire, I have these like two slopes. And on one side it literally says like numbing out. And on the other side, it just says like rage bait engagement. And so I actually think that represents my merge of kind of creative real world and virtual world nowadays, where I wake up into the world and I know that there's just gonna be a bunch of things that are pulling on me that are like a slippery slope I could fall down. And so it's not enough for me to just say, okay, I'm gonna just go on social media for 10 minutes and that's it. It's not that I'll be on there for 3 hours. I have self-control. But I have to remind myself what my neural circuits are confronted with each day. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like the feeling of getting over that razor wire. Sometimes I feel like I'm literally crawling through it and getting to the other side and completing some work, so that even just like 45 minutes of really solid work, that landscape transforms into a completely different picture where it's just a flat landscape and I can go anywhere I want the rest of the day. And I'm not, exaggerating that the transformation in what I sort of feel capable of is completely different. I only offer that as, if people are struggling to be like, yeah, I'm hearing all this, but I'm watching it and I'm not doing anything with it. Like you have to kind of scruff yourself and throw yourself through the razor wire these days. Yes. It's getting harder to work like you did in the 80s because, as you said, one of the benefits of the 80s and 90s was that there wasn't a lot of distraction. You could take a bus ride and read a book or learn or journal or, do math problems or do your homework or whatever the hell it was, right?
And if you complain, people were just like, stop complaining, pussy. Get to fucking work.
Yeah.
Listen, I get it. Like there is a certain amount of toxicity that I understand, but it also made people tougher.
Yeah. The thing that I grew up skateboarding and I wasn't great at it. I mean, I got put on a team.
I was 1,000 times worse than you, but also grew up.
Well, I got put on a team out of sympathy. So that's how bad it was. But I have a lot of friends in that world. And I'll tell you, there's this story, real world story that a few years back, a dad pushed his daughter didn't want to drop in on the ramp. I think it was his daughter, maybe his son. And he pushed her. And I think he actually got charged with it like a charge. When I was a kid, and this is kind of like when I was a kid, but this is true. When I was a kid, there's a guy, he's my good friend Gary. I've known him since I was 14. The way you dropped in on a vert ramp was you put your tail down, and it's scary. It looks over vert.
You look like you're gonna die.
And you potentially could slam really hard. I've seen some broken arms on first attempts and second attempts. And basically Gary would say to me, I'm gonna push down to the end of the deck, the thing up on top, and I'm gonna push back. And by the time I make it back, you've either dropped in or I'm gonna push you in.
Yeah,
Guess what? I dropped in on my own. Did I slam? Yes, dude. So there was a different mindset. And I think when we were kids, it sucked to hear I trudged for 7 miles in the snow. So we're kind of in that a little bit. We're a little bit in that right now.
For sure.
And I want to acknowledge that we know we're in that. But the thing that you can't get in your teens and 20s and 30s, you have that drive, but the thing you can't get is how valuable it is to capture the best of what's available to you and to discard the worst of what's available to you. And like there's this whole notion like no one's coming to save you. Like no one's coming to save you. It took me, I had to be in real states of fear, to yank myself out of mediocrity. And there was a stage in my life where I was really just like I wasn't doing shit at all, basically, except dumb stuff. And so no one's coming to save you. But the best part is when you start saving yourself even a little bit, the sense of agency that comes from that is awesome. And for anyone younger hearing this, I'm just going to tell you that someday you'll be on a microphone telling somebody, like, when you're in your 20s and 30s. So I'm here to say that on the threshold of my 50th birthday, you're going to be there too. I remember when we'd sit around and be like, why are these guys talking to us about how hard it was and this and that?
Yeah.
But I think that's the only real thing that you can't access when you're young. Youth isn't wasted on the young, like it's kind of what you do with it. It's like, it's an opportunity. Someone kicks a soccer ball your way, you can use it or not use it. But I love the phrase, it's from Sam Sheridan's book, A Fighter's Heart, a book I really love about all the different fighting sports. And he says, you can't have your 20th birthday until you're 19. There's certain things you just have to wait for. And there's certain things that just require experience. But the other stuff, it's like, you just have to like scruff yourself and get your ass in gear. And that razor wire picture I offer up because it doesn't get easier but to do it, but it gets more and more predictable how to do it. And so it's the same effort every day. There are very few days that are just easy breezy. This notion of flow is kind of an illusion in my mind. Flow comes on the other side of the razor wire.
I love that. All right, you've given a ton of advice to people at the individual level. Now, given your closeness certainly to Jay Bhattacharya, how would you advise the current administration? Like, how should we be approaching this so that good ideas get to the broader public? And there's really two people I want to talk to you about: Jay Bhattacharya at the NIH, and then RFK at the HHS. Like, what should these guys be doing?
Yeah, so you want to just get into some like non-controversial territory?
Of course. Sure. Let's go all the way to vaccines.
Yeah, sure. So before I do this, I just want to say very clearly, and I'm not saying this to impress, I'm saying this because I want to make sure that what I'm about to say, people understand my framework. I am only here because US tax dollars funded the grants that I worked on for my PhD, my postdoc, and in my laboratory. I was an NIH reviewer for many years, so I reviewed grants, decide what get funded, what didn't get funded. I was a standing member, and I had grants from the NIH for many years, which means millions of taxpayer dollars helped fund my laboratory to do research. So I understand the process of what gets funded and what doesn't get funded and this kind of thing. Okay, Jay and I know each other well. I know Robert less well. I think it's absolutely crucial that there be an audit of the NIH, and I think that's what Jay...
What would we be looking for?
We're looking at what work is meaningful and what work is derivative. I'm going to get some hate from my scientist friends for this, but if you're not doing derivative work, you're not worried about it. Derivative work is work that the NIH traditionally has favored funding very, what we would call incremental work. And this is a shame. This has to do with the fact that the grant process became so competitive that they really wanted to see work already completed before they'd say they'd fund it. So there was this game that scientists have been playing for the last 10, 15 years that no one wants to talk about, but I insist on talking about, which is you would complete the work, then you would submit your grant, show that you could do the work, they'd fund that work, and then you would use the money to do the next thing, repeat. The problem with this model is that it forces fields to move very, very slowly. There's also a process in which it feeds this kind of communities working on similar problems so that everyone can understand everyone else's grants very well. And if you come up with something that's really outside the box of very high potential payoff, there was a lot of discussion around supporting innovation and significance and big outcomes, but those weren't the grants typically getting funded. It was very hard to change fields or do something new. It was so scientific progress, especially in the neurosciences, has been very slow. There's been a lot of technology development, but if you look at the developments in cell biology and cancer biology in the last 50 years, you can compare that to neuroscience. Neuroscience got a surge, but progress has been slow in terms of treating disease. Certainly, we don't have treatments for most of the major neurologic and psychiatric diseases. So first and foremost, I want Jay and company to encourage high risk, high potential payoff, not risk in terms of public health risk, but high potential payoff work. What that means is some grants are only going to get funded, go 5 years, and it'll be nothing, and someone will have to come up with a completely new proposal. So that's
Are there areas you want to see them focus? Cancer, Alzheimer's?
Psychiatric and neurologic illness. Okay. After all, it's the National Institutes of Health. Now, people will say, well, mouse work isn't the same as human work. Mouse work is, I'll go on record saying, very important for establishing basic mechanisms that then are translated to humans. However, there are a lot of studies that are being done in mouse now and in models like C. elegans worms and Drosophila flies that are kind of repeating themes that we've known about for a long time.
And you think that's pointless?
I think it's a waste of taxpayer dollars, given there are a finite number of dollars. I think there needs to be a very serious audit of what work is really meaningful. And I'm not saying take people's money away completely. I'm saying you tell people, listen, you got one more year or else you got to propose something radically different.
Right.
Because the taxpayers are no longer interested in government funded arts and crafts. Some work, I'll say this, I don't like saying this, but the truth is some work is phenomenal and is really making great strides to improving human health and treating disease. Some of it is government-funded arts and crafts. And I think that the scientists out there, they know who they are. Now, there is value in basic research. It doesn't all have to be applied research. I mean, CRISPR, right, came from discoveries that were essentially from microbiology. So you never really know what's going to, where things can lead. But we're now living in the age where you can make much better hypotheses about what could lead to better fields. I think the other thing that's really important is I do believe, and I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this on X, COVID and vaccine controversies aside, we need to maintain or increase the federal budget for research. It's not a huge portion of the federal budget. And believe it or not, both sides of Congress agree on that. It's very unlikely that the federal budget for research will be cut. And then people say, well, I don't want to pay for this stuff that's meaningless and it's all with big pharma. Listen, it's not all linked into big pharma. Most scientists are doing really good work. They're trying to get it right. And most who are doing kind of derivative work that's not very, high potential payoff are doing that because it's been the way traditionally that you get your grant funded. So we need an overhaul where really exciting, high potential payoff work is being supported. That's the number one thing. The number two thing is we need to incentivize young scientists to go into the field. We are losing a generation of scientists. This was true before the new administration because doing science is hard. You don't get rich doing it. And there's a lot of uncertainty in it. So we need to make sure that there's enough grant dollars directed towards younger investigators. So I'm talking about 55 and younger.
That's young.
Or even, because you're finishing your PhD typically when you're in your early 30s, and then you're postdoc in your 30s, and people are starting their labs in their 40s. Wow. Oh, man. You're getting your first R01, your first big grant. I got my first R01, let's see, I want to make sure I get this right. I got my first R01 at 35.
Dude, genius is a young man's game. How are they dealing with that? Like when you look at physicists, all of their breakthroughs are in their 20s and early 30s.
Yeah, physics and math tend to be fields where most of the great discoveries happen early in someone's career. Biology tends to build on itself within laboratories, and as people go on and their laboratories get bigger and better funded, they are able to acquire better people.
Did we see that even before the current grant?
Yeah, that's always, my former postdoc advisor, Ben Barris, he's dead now, but he used to say, no one, these are his words, but he used to say, no one does anything interesting after, at 5 years after tenure. They're kind of their big discoveries are done. Right. And then they tend to do really great labs, tend to do really great work. But if you really look and you go, is this awesome work? I mean, there are examples like Doudna Lab and CRISPR and things like that, but a lot of labs are just kind of stamp collecting at that point. They get really good at the grants and papers game.
Right.
And I'm not cynical about science. I love research science. Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's the raw materials for the podcast after all,
It's no fish tanks,
but. Yeah, it's not fish tanks, and it's, but it's not crypto, but no, I'm not into crypto a little bit. But here's the thing. If we can fund higher potential payoff work, and we can support the younger researchers. And several of my graduate students and postdocs now run their own labs. So yes, I'm heavily biased here. I'm not saying that the older investigators need to be turned out to pasture. They have a lot of value to bring to teaching. They have a lot of value to bring to grant review, to paper review. They should be the one doing all the boring administrative stuff for which there's no, they'll keep their jobs and get salaries. And some of them are spectacular, but they can get private funding. They're going to hate me for saying this.
Jay handed you a big stack of these are the grant applications. Yeah. Are there keywords you'd be searching for?
I would read abstracts and I would look at publications.
But narrow it down for me. You're so obviously we're going to be in neuroscience, but what are the big things you're if we solve that?
Yeah.
Is it Alzheimer's?
Yeah. So if I saw a grant that said, in the last round of funding, or what I'm proposing is to test a completely new molecule in the context of Alzheimer's. This molecule is found in neurons. This molecule accumulates in Alzheimer's brains. And
so Alzheimer's number one.
Alzheimer's is one of the major ones. I would say Parkinson's is another.
Is that on the rise?
Parkinson's is common enough that, loss of dopaminergic neurons is common enough that you want to be able to treat this. Yeah, okay. It's age associated also, so there's severe and less severe forms. I would say restoring vision to the blind, a field that was my former field, huge. I mean, more than 80 million people per year get glaucoma, which is the second leading cause of blindness. Whoa. Cataract, we can now treat. You can slide out the occluded lens. You can put in a new one. That's been done. I mean, and the eye is, it's more than an engineering problem, but it's an engineering/biology problem. Neuralink's working on this. Paralysis as well. There are other people working on this stuff. But I would say Alzheimer's is a huge one. I do think that the emphasis on metabolic health in the brain is a very interesting idea.
Now, I've heard you ask questions. I have no idea what your thesis is on this, but ask questions about the relatedness of parental metabolic health to autism. Is that like autism from where I'm sitting is like the rates are skyrocketing
3%.
So hard? 3% what?
3%. 3 out of 100 births.
God damn.
The world expert in this, Sergio Pasca, is an MD at Stanford. He studies this. He's working on treatments and cures for autism.
3%.
Now they vary in severity, right? You have what's called profound autism, people that will always require support. You have people that are kind of on different aspects of the spectrum. You have things like Timothy syndrome, which is associated with heart defects as well. When people say, why are we trying to cure autism? I understand what they're saying.
I don't. That's crazy.
But ask parents, would you rather have your unborn baby be, someday be an autistic child or non-autistic child? You're going to get the answer you expect. Yeah. Also, we rarely discuss the physical health issues that are associated with autism that are like epilepsy, like heart challenges, like gut microbiome challenges that are very severe in many cases. So, but it's 3%, it's 4-to-1 male to female now, which is that SRY gene confers a susceptibility also. Or it could be that females are protected somehow against whatever it is. Chris Palmer, who perhaps, he's the psychiatrist from Harvard Medical School, he's really been pushing this idea that early inflammation of the brain is always inflammation, excessive inflammation brought about by any number of different things, maybe multiple things, might establish a greater susceptibility to autism and explain some of this. So that's why he talks about metabolic health in the parents.
And so speaking of RFK, have we completely debunked the idea of vaccines and autism?
Okay, so Robert Kennedy wants to reinvestigate. Here's the deal. Here's what we know in the published literature. I'll just stick to that because the rest is really just speculation, right? Andrew Wakefield was this medical doctor in the UK who published papers on what he said was a link between vaccines and autism, MMR, measles, mumps, rubella vaccine and autism. There are people who still believe there's a link based on those data. Here's what we know for sure. Those papers were retracted and he lost his medical license for allegations of fraud. Okay, I didn't go into those papers. I don't, but so that's where that stands. There's another group. This is a father-son group who have also been on this kind of vaccine autism train, who I think the last name is pronounced Meyer. I think it's Meijer, something like that. And they've also been big proponents of this idea that vaccines are associated with autism. Here's the problem with their data. The problem is many of their papers have been shown by others to have flaws in methodology and or that the review process wasn't carried out the way that standard review was carried out. Now, I'm not saying I didn't go and, I'm not the one making those claims. Other people are making those claims. So there's very little belief in those papers from the traditional academic and medical community. And yet those are used often to cite, support for the vaccine autism link. My understanding is that RFK placed one or both of those guys on this sort of vaccine review board. So, that's controversial in its own right. Yeah. There are many.
Are you tense about that personally? Like, I don't know how much you want to comment about that.
Sure. I mean, I think that there have to be balancers for anytime someone has an extreme position, you don't want a panel made up of, diametrically opposed positions, with a big valley in the middle. You also don't want a bunch of people lumped up on one side that all believe the party line or go against the party line. I think panels of reasonable experts that can really debate things and vote is the way to go. But we have to have thresholds for what we consider good data versus bad data. Now, in the current situation, we say published is published. Some people say, well, that journal's the great journal, Nature, Science, right? Other people say, well, Nature and Science isn't that. People start arguing about this. And then you're down in the weeds around, science sociology.
Yeah.
My feeling is, look, there are many papers that point to no lack of direct relationship between vaccines and autism. However, and I just can't in good conscience just say that full stop. So I say, however, if those are really strong data, they'll hold up for another investigation. Now, is that what we want to be spending our federal tax dollars on? Apparently so, right? He's head of HHS, he gets to decide. Good data should stand the test of time. So I do think if they're going to go in and test them again, and apparently they are, it should stand up. It should stand up. How those studies are done, who's reviewing the papers, and how they're interpreted is going to be absolutely critical. So I think it should be an independent review board. So people that really know how to look at the data and for which they have no bias one way or the other, that they have no skin in the game. We're not talking about, bringing in Peter Hotez, who's like a real vaccine proponent, versus, Malone, right? Because it's just like, it's like professional wrestling at this point.
That is so well said.
That's not, both those guys could argue me into the ground that they're the more qualified, and I know I have my opinion, but it's just they're the wrong people for this situation.
For sure.
We need a bunch of really great cancer biologists. We need some people outside the US, and we need people that are open to the possibility, because this is what Palmer has raised, that there may be an inflammation susceptibility that certain vaccines exacerbate, and that there's a genetic predisposition to autism that sends things down a certain trajectory. I have a feeling whatever the answer is, it's going to be far more complex than yes, they cause autism or no, they don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, in terms of Robert's general theme of let's get dyes out of the food, cool. Like, let's get dyes out of the food. Is that the biggest issue that we're facing? No, I think the highly processed foods are not food. I think they have calories. I think they increase dopamine. I think they provide very few nutrients, and they provide little satiety. They are basically the equivalent, the nutritional equivalent of OnlyFans minus the masturbation part. Okay, so they're about as good for our species as that.
Should I be jerking off when I eat Twinkies?
Please, no. And now this clip,
I got to get something out of this.
No. So I think that
hilarious.
And we also, I've been looking at this historically, right? I'm not a nutrition scientist, but if you step back and you look at what's the history of cuisine in the United States? We're not a country famous for our love of nutritious food. What are the American foods? As American as apple pie, cheeseburgers, corn dogs, hot dogs, fried chicken, milkshakes, pizza.
Yeah, that's literally what I grew
and then
up
everything else that we like is like the really high calorie fat and carb combinations with sugar, like croissants, lasagna, like that's our version of French and Italian food, right? And so this is not a country that historically has thought much about high nutrient density relative to calories. And I think that's really the key, high nutrient density relative to calories. So you want your proteins. For me, that's, meat, fish, eggs, chicken, et cetera. You want your quality fats, you want your olive oils, some saturated fat from butter. If some is probably fine, as long as it's limited. You want your clean starches, right? Pasta, rice, these things. But if you go to France, they take great pride in the nutritional value and taste of their food and how satiating it is at a given portion. That's not the United States. We were always about volume and value. And what happened is we stopped moving. We started eating more and we stopped moving. If Ozempic has solved any puzzle, it's the following. Why is everybody so fat? Or you weren't even allowed to say that word a few years ago. Why is everybody so fat? Because they're eating more calories than they burn. We sat around scratching our heads for years going, I wonder why everyone's getting, we were eating more and moving less. And I'm not being disparaging, right? I mean, obesity is a serious health concern. You can now finally talk about this as a health concern. And the ones that are really have been injured the most are these poor kids that were just eating what they were given. They're not trying to damage themselves. Yeah. So, and then the problem is that adipose fat tissue generates its own hormone signals, and then it starts diminishing the other hormone systems of the body and depleting, intramuscular fat gets stored, and then now you've got a really sick animal, human, that you wouldn't do this to your dog, and we're doing this to ourselves. So I think RFK's emphasis on dyes is kind of like tip of the iceberg. Right. I think the key is you can't outlaw things in this country very easily, right? Especially not foods, especially on limited budgets. But I think the real emphasis should be on getting people knowledge about and access to really nutritious food, which includes things like steaks and burgers. It's just like, peel away the sugar-filled buns and the cheese and get them eating that, and vegetables and fruit. And I think we're going to get there, but not after a lot of pain and suffering. So, as you can probably tell, I'm very passionate about these issues, because people will say, the federal budget for research is ridiculous. This all just funds big pharma. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's a lie. The number of grants that are funded, NIH-funded labs, these people aren't making a lot of money on pharma. And if they do make a discovery, like the discovery of growth hormone a few years ago, the investigator might get some money, the university gets some money, and the company makes some money. But I think we all are grateful that growth hormone exists as a thing, that synthetic growth hormone. So it's not this diabolical structure that we imagine. Big pharma has its issues.
I was going to say this is where,
but it's not academia that's the problem. That's why I want to be very clear. And now I of course I'm biased, right? I'm still a tenured professor at Stanford.
But I think it's worth putting your foot down on that, especially because you're from the inside. You're somebody that's earned certainly a lot of credibility by years, year 5 of putting out good information. But so entering the economic realm, I realized very quickly that, like in physics, when you offer a new theory, it better describe the world that I see. Mm-hmm. So in economics, when you describe hey, capitalism works, you better explain then why shit is so broken right now. Mm. And if you cannot explain why somebody can't afford a house, why so many people are the American dream is dead. Mm-hmm. If you can't explain why that's happening, don't come to me with this thing that I'm supposed to believe works wonders isn't working. Yeah,
great argument. They're great argument. So going back to the earlier part about what I would tell Jay, why is the NIH kind of broken or been broken? Well, we're not funding young investigators. They're not incentivized. Meaning it's hard to get money to do really new things. It's derivative thing. What's the problem? And I'm going to earn a lot of enemies this way, but I have tenure, I'm good, is too many older investigators. They're not retiring. They're not retiring. In Japan, they understand this. They do a forced retirement. Too many. What age? I think it's 65.
Wow.
Okay. I could be wrong, but there's real value placed on the young investigators there. So in our system, you have people who have 5, 6, 7, 8 grants. That's a huge number of grants. That's 5, 6, 7, 8 grants that could fund 5, 6, 7, 8 other laboratories that are starting out. They're taking too much of the funding. And these are the same people who are saying, we need more money because the young investigators aren't going to have any money. They're taking too much. So I don't earn any friends in the older group, but look, I also have this independent life now. So they come at me. I've seen how this process works. They can run off foundation money. They're tenured. They'll still get a salary. You get more time with your kids and grandkids. Spend some time mentoring the younger generation of scientists. We need to peel off that top layer. And yes, some of them are doing spectacular work. And guess what? It's time to go. Because there's only a finite amount of money. And those people are eventually going to retire and die. I've watched many of them retire and die. They're going to retire and die. And this next generation, there's a huge trough in terms of their funding. We've got people leaving science in the United States. And if you want to look at it from a monetary perspective, the return on investment to great science done in basic laboratories is enormous. It's like a 20-to-1. 20-to-1. It's variable because not every lab is going to make a druggable discovery or a deviceable discovery. But when you look at it historically, that's an underestimate. So, and I'm probably even lower than I should be, but I'm going to stay conservative with that. So the problem is too many old scientists not doing much, but taking too much of the funding and publishing derivative papers. This is the issue. And you might get the sense that maybe I've been asked about this and maybe I'm playing a bit of a role. You bet I am. Yeah. You bet. And I'm not competing for funding anymore. I don't need their money. So
I'm very excited for the Huberman I don't give a fuck arc. Like that.
Well, I
feel like we're at the very beginning.
We're
of that.
Today was the official start.
We're unveiling.
I told Rob, my producer, before coming over here. Yesterday we were talking. I said, I feel like I'm at kind of a maturational threshold, and he goes, "Uh-oh." Yeah, I mean, I've done enough. I'm not all wise, but these are systems and areas that I'm very familiar with, and I think that Young scientists are also very afraid of older scientists because they're like, oh, all the promotions, all the elected to the National Academy. Look, in a couple of years, the National Academy of Sciences might not even exist.
It's wild.
Trump might eliminate the AAAS, the American Academy of Science, American Association for the Advancement of Science. Science Magazine may not exist. So this whole kind of old network is, these things have gone on cycles. Ray Dalio talks about financial and cultural and, these macro cycles over 500 years. These happen in science too. And I've studied those with a fine tooth comb. I've studied those. And what you see is every few years a field kind of wakes up, because guess what? The veil's pulled back and they're like, okay, where are all the discoveries? What are we doing wrong? And they go, well, it's slow, it's hard. And they go, actually, let's look at the structure of what you've been doing. Revision. Yeah. And that's going to happen in the next few years. And I think that—
And you're here for it? You're clapping?
I'm here for it, provided, and I do think Jay has been very, very good about lending his ear to people. Jay Bhattacharya is not a radical disruptor. He's somebody that is definitely under competing pressures, and he's doing his best, but he's listening. And my hope is that he'll do what, at least these two things. He says he will, and you can bet I'm gonna stay in his ear. And there's a cohort of younger investigators that run labs that are like, yeah, like we really want to go after big problems. We need the money to do it. And so it's like, old guys and gals, time to step aside. And if they say the same thing about me in podcasting someday, I'll step aside. There's a time to hang up your cleats.
Okay, here's where I will take a different stance. So Eric Weinstein was the first person to introduce me to this idea that the old guard needs to step aside. I'll take a hard pass on that. The new kids need to get so hardcore that they cannot be fucking denied, like plain and simple. Podcasting became podcasting because it was young guys that were like, fuck these kids. Like, I'm not going to try to compete with TV. Like, I'm just going to go do my own thing.
It's like indie music in the 90s.
1,000%. Look, if you can take over the current system, do it. That's awesome. The infrastructure is already there. But if you can't, you don't just hang your cleats up, cry about it. Look back in history, it's always the young bucks that are like, cool, I'll find a way around this. We need people, to your point, like we've got to get culture to say, dear young, brilliant mind, I want to celebrate the life out of you when you go do a thing and be successful. That's why I love what you've done in terms of becoming a podcaster, getting literal global notoriety. Obviously, it comes with slings and arrows, but it's incredible the fact that we get to watch you learn this stuff. You make it available to all of us. And now you're getting to that wisdom part of your career where you also have the director of the NIH in your phone. It's like, that's a really interesting thing. But it came of you coming up through the way youngins did it. You know what I mean? Like you're inventing a new path and you're doing something new and different. So may you never step aside, but may you get outperformed. It's like that. I want someone I want to be able to fight as hard as I can. And I want a young buck to take it from me. But I'm not going to give it up. I'm not going to hand it over. I'm going to try to do my shit till the day I die.
Yeah. And we're taking good care of ourselves. So they're going to have to come at us.
They're going to have to fight hard. Yeah. But it's like, I'm not going to pull the ladder up. That's where I'm like, all right, you're a dick.
Yeah.
Like if you're pulling the ladder up and you're trying to handicap the next generation in some way, I couldn't respect myself if I was doing that. But I also wouldn't respect myself if I was like, all right, you just take it on.
Yeah.
Get out of here.
No, I have no plans to hang up my cleats. I think that, there will be a natural endpoint at some point by death or something else, or I'll pivot to something.
I'll speak for myself. I will fade into irrelevance. I have no doubt that I'll be so disconnected from culture. It'll just be too different. And so the people that understand me, that grew up like me, they're just going to die. I mean, this is the way of things. I don't have any beef with that, but I'm going to go down swinging.
Well, I love documentaries, and I love watching documentaries across fields. And, we talked about the 27 effect, people dying at 27. Like, you want a really beautiful window into kind of like the spirit of art and how fame can destroy somebody. And you watch, Basquiat, about Jean-Michel Basquiat, or the documentary about him. Or I just recently watched The Future is Unwritten, which is a free documentary about Joe Strummer and The Clash. The Clash only lasted for 5 years.
It's wild. They had that.
It's wild. It was a short, and then he went into this long kind of creative desert that lasted almost 12 to 15 years.
Whoa.
Came back at the end and did 3 albums that were produced by my friend Tim Armstrong, with a band that was not punk. It was Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros. Amazing music. And as Tim said, there's 3 masterpieces at the end of his career. He seemed to pull together all the aspects of himself, like having grown up in Cairo and all these places at the end. And I watched that and I was like, oh, this is so interesting, because if you watch other music band documentaries, Grateful Dead or whatever, you'll see that there are these arcs where people have, it's the initial thing, like you watch the Defiant ones about beats, and that whole thing with Dre, and like you see there's this sort of essence energy at the beginning when you're just being you, and then that like creates this big wave, and then there's inevitably like people fall out because of the excesses or because of the public attention, and then people grapple with kind of like trying to find their way, and then the ones that break through that with the knowledge of how the system works, and they still have the energy, and they're not succumbing to the excesses, it's like, whew, they're the ones that really rise to like major power, and you can never really predict where they're gonna be. Benevolent power, creative power. So that's why like Dre's where he's at. You look at his story versus like some of the other guys in NWA, and it's like, whoa, like these are very divergent paths, right? Dead, jail, destroyed into ignominy versus like, where Dre is at, right? So, but they all started from the same place. And so you start looking at these two very different genres of music, or you look at like a scientific career, like Oliver Sacks turned public health educator. And you start realizing there's always this kind of like raw energy, not really thinking about where it's gonna go, breakthrough, downshift, and then most people dissipate at that point. So the ability to just keep pushing through, like you did, you sold Quest. What did you do the next day? You went back to work. Yeah. I'm so grateful to my PhD advisor because I didn't have that good sense. And I'll never forget, I think it was my second paper in graduate school. We published it in Science. It's like, less than 1% acceptance rate. My second paper, I'm like, published in Science magazine. And I was so stoked. And my dad, who's a scientist, was like, just enjoy this feeling, but you can expect a dip afterwards. He somehow understood the dopamine trough. And I went to her, I was like, are we gonna throw a party? And she's like, I mean, we could get a pizza or something, but like you already had the party. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, the work was the party. Yeah. And I was like, okay, no party. Went back in and we ended up publishing like 8 or 10 papers together. Yeah, over the next, it took us some years. And that was so valuable because I thought you win, you celebrate. Yeah. And she was like, I mean, we can have a pizza, but like, why not just go back to the process? Yeah. So it like really speaks, it's a much, it's a micro level. It wasn't the sale of $1 billion company, but the lesson was the same for me. So, but yeah, I'm not gonna pull up the ladder either. I want to see more great podcasters. When Chris Williamson hopped on the scene, I was like, this kid's gonna do awesome. It's weird that I call him a kid. He's like a peer. He's not that much younger than me. But he was on Love Island, so we get to tease him a little bit. Yeah. But I was like, this guy's gonna be a major player. I could just see it. It's like, it's just apparent. And now I've been watching Founders podcast with David Senra. He kind of does around founders and that kind of thing. He nerds out and does these solos, and I'm like, the passion that he's putting in it, I'm like, this guy's killing it.
Yeah, when you see somebody that's really
just the energy like that, and it feeds us because it reminds us of like how it all. You're like, yes, there's more of us. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah,
brother, I have so many more things that I could ask you, but I will just thank you for coming on. This was absolutely incredible. Thank you so much for your time. This was really, really fun.
It was great fun for me too, and it's always a pleasure to sit down and to see you. And I'm in such gratitude for you and Lisa and just what you've been doing and like your spirit about it. Like, I don't know if things get you down. If they do, it's not apparent. And you've been a real inspiration for me. You were in this game before I was, and so you're like my kind of like the varsity guy when I was coming up as JV.
Obscenely kind. Thank you.
No, it's true, and I learn from you all the time, on camera, off camera. So I'm in real gratitude to you.
I appreciate it. Well, the next thing I want to do, I want to get you to be a full-blown capitalist. So if you want to tell people where they can get some of this incredible yerba mate, everybody.
Yeah, so I'm half Argentine. My dad's Argentine. I grew up drinking loose leaf mate, which is stuff out of the gourd. And I always wanted a 0 sugar cold brew mate. So I developed, and I'm a partial owner, full disclosure, in Matina yerba mate. They're now on Amazon. Soon they'll be in that big store where everybody shops for healthy stuff,
I think I have a
and
guess.
Other places. And you can order directly from Matina. It's awesome. It has 0 sugar, 120 120 milligrams of caffeine. It's all organic. It's got organic ginger juice. It tastes awesome. There are a bunch of flavors like peach and mint and raspberry and mango. And I love this stuff. Full disclosure, I'm a serious caffeine drinker. I drink like up to 800 milligrams of caffeine a day. Most people don't require that, but it's a super clean energy. I love it. And if you give it a try and you like it, or if you don't, send me some feedback as a DM on Instagram. But
listen, man, I love it. Obviously, I'm a big believer in entrepreneurship and people making incredible products that they really believe in. And to everybody out there watching, he showed up with this today just to let me try some. I didn't even know it was his. So I was like, bro, you got to start like putting this stuff on
this
camera.
wasn't the intended promotional.
No, but I want to get him wearing t-shirts, like for real.
Yeah.
Like when you make something that you believe in, like stand 10 toes down, let the world know, like don't be bashful. I know that people are going to bitch and complain or whatever, but literally the modern world brought to you by entrepreneurs. And so being bashful about the things that you create, bringing something to market is incredibly difficult. And now the market's going to decide whether it's good or not, but getting it to this point is extremely difficult, very rare. And I'm excited to try it, man. So I hope that it smashes for you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you like it. And 90% of the adult population of the world consumes caffeine every day. Yeah. And I will argue that it's the best, most even, clear energy. So I love it. And I'm excited for people to try it. So thank you.
Man. Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, man.
All right, everybody. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care. Peace. If you like this conversation, check out this episode to learn more. Are we living in a simulation? And if we are, if this universe is simply a rendered environment, then there's no reason to believe that death is the end. Today's guest is MIT-trained computer scientist, author, and video game entrepreneur.